Good evening and welcome to the October 26th, November 26th, thank you, Pittsburgh Public Schools Board of Education Legislative Meeting. Would everyone please rise so we can salute the flag?
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I would like to remind everyone to please turn off all cell phones or pagers or put them on vibrate. As is our tradition and procedure before the legislative meeting, we like to recognize students and employees of the Pittsburgh Public School District.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Today we have a very special presentation, so we will ask for Superintendent Linda Lane to join us in the front. Tonight, we would like to take a moment to pay tribute to several school board members ending their term of service this evening. We want to thank each individual for their leadership, dedication, and commitment of their time and talents to the students and families of the Pittsburgh Public Schools. As we are very thankful to each of our 4 outgoing board members, Shireen Shealy, Floyd Skip McCray, Teresa Calese, and Jean Fink for their service. We want to take the time to recognize each of them with a few words, and then Superintendent Linda Lane will present them with a special bronze plate. We'll call them up each individually, and then the group will remain. It's engraved with the city skyline, their names and dates of services. First, we would like to recognize Board President Shireen Shealy. She first joined the board representing District 1 back in 2009. Ms. Shealy is the mother of 4 children, and she resides in the community of North Point Breeze as a chemical engineer for NRG Energy. Ms. Shealy also uses expertise as an adjunct teaching faculty member at the Community College of Allegheny County, CCAC, and she teaches Introduction to Chemistry. During Ms. Shealy's time on the board, she served as president of the board and as the chair of the Education Committee, co-chair of the Negotiations Committee, and the Right to Education Liaison. Thank you, Ms. Shealy, for your 4 years of service to the students and families of the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Board Representative Floyd Skip, as people lovingly call him, McCray was first elected to the board in 2001, and he represents District 9. Mr. McCray is a retired Pittsburgh firefighter, horticulturalist, and the father of 1 Pittsburgh Public Schools graduate. During Mr. McCray's 12 years of service, he has chaired several committees, including Audit, Business, Finance, Safety and Security, and Student Services. Mr. McCray has also served as board delegate to the Safety and Security Committee. He may have left the fire service, but he didn't leave his spark behind. You may have remembered for years he dressed as Sparky the Fire Dog and delivered fire safety programs to a countless number of students. Thank you, Mr. McCray, for your 12 years of service to the students and families of Pittsburgh Public Schools. Next up, District 5 Board Representative Teresa Calese. Not only has she served on the Board of Education in various capacities since 2001, including president and second vice president, she is also the business owner of a hair salon, the liaison to the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh Board of Trustees, and the mother of 2 Pittsburgh Public Schools graduates. Ms. Calese has chaired several committees, including Audit, Business, Finance, Government Relations, Negotiations, and Personnel. In addition, she chaired the committee to evaluate superintendents and served on the committee for the superintendent search. Ms. Calese also served as a member of several book selection committees to select books for English as a second language, which is quite what we would interesting, because she's also fluent in Italian. As many of you may know, she was a key figure in expanding the educational horizons overseas. She helped coordinate Pittsburgh Menendeo's video conference with a school in Italy. She spearheaded that coordination and allowed our children to get international exposure. Thank you, Ms. Khaleesi, for your 12 years of service. And last but certainly not least, we recognize Board Representative Jean Fink, who has served our district unselfishly for decades. She is the mother of 6, grandmother of 9, and great-grandmother of 5. Ms. Fink was first elected to represent District 7 in 1976. During her time as a board representative, she has served as a delegate on behalf of the board of the Council of Urban Boards of Education. The board represents more than 100 urban school districts in 35 states, Ontario, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. She served 1 year as president and has chaired the Business Affairs, Education, Facilities, Personnel, Pupil Services, and Strategic Planning Committees. Since Ms. Fink served for more than a decade, we reached out to her daughter to learn a little bit more about her. She proudly shared that she told us that her mother was a part of this human chain across Route 51 to fight for a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit in front of Overbrook School. She also contributed to countless ethnic food fairs held at district schools, and including her daughter, and her oldest daughter said that their third grade class still remembers to this day the school being filled up with the smell of sauerkraut and sausages. So Ms. Fink definitely dedicated over 30 years to her students and families of Pittsburgh Public Schools. She would even adopt some of those children. One time it was raining and she drove by with her Volkswagen bus and picked up 17 children and took them home. So we want to thank you for your decades of sharing with us and for your family to allow us to borrow you for a while. You may have noticed that there are some roses. We would like our incoming board members to stand because they wanted to show their appreciation for paving the way for them to come on a board and serve our community. And so we ask you to still stick around because we have more awards to give to our long-term school directors. These certificates are presented on behalf of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association to recognize leaders for their years of service ranging from 8 to 52. According to the PSBA president, Dr. Marcella Diaz-Myers, school board members are spending more time and more of their personal time on school-related activities. 54% report devoting 16 or more hours a month to school board businesses, which shows a real commitment on their part. Their efforts reflect their dedication to giving our children the opportunity to gain knowledge through the best educational system possible. This evening, we would like to recognize the unique role of school board service and the long-term contributions of individuals who bring their energy, talents, and values to the guidance of our youth. We present a certificate for 30 years of service, 16 of which were continuous, to Ms. Jean Fink. Mr. Floyd McRae has served Pittsburgh Public Schools for 12 years. His colleague, Ms. Teresa Khaleesi, has also joined him and dedicated 12 years of services to this board. And in addition, Mr. Thomas Sumter Jr. has spent 8 years serving the district and the community. Mr. Thomas Sumter, if you can join us, please. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work and commitment. I apologize for the lengthiness, but there are so many accomplishments that we wanted to recognize. This concludes our presentation, but please join us outside the meeting for a small celebration. Thank you.
Mr. Oh. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley,
Here.
Mrs. Khaleesi,
Yes, I'm here for the last time.
Mrs. Fink,
Here.
Mrs. Azuda,
Here.
Dr. Holly,
Here.
Mr. Eisler,
Present.
Mr. McCray,
Here.
Mr. Sumter,
Present.
Ms. Shealy,
Here.
all present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. In order to improve the governance of the board, there were 5 areas that were selected for which goals, beliefs, and commitments were created: achievement, safety, support, equity, and public engagement. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to educating all children to their highest level of academic achievement. Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to providing a safe and orderly environment for all students and employees. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to providing efficient and effective support for all students, families, teachers, and administrators. The Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to distributing resources in an efficient and equitable manner to address the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible. And last but not least, the Pittsburgh Board of Education is committed to improving public confidence and encouraging strong parent-community engagement in the district. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Will everyone please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions?
Second.
Khaleesi, Eisler. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Oh,
I'd have to abstain. I wasn't here last month.
abstention from Mr. McCray. Opposed, same sign. The minutes stand approved. At this time, I would like to read the executive statement. In addition to executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting of October 23, 2013, the board met in executive sessions on October 29th, November 20th, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. Finally, at the executive session immediately before this legislative meeting, the board discussed student discipline cases that involve violations of various portions of the Student Code of Conduct. The board does not vote at executive session. We will begin this evening with the committee report on education that is before you. If you would please turn to page 10 of 10 of the report, I would like to give you the student suspension, transfer, and expulsion numbers for the month. "34 students suspended for 4 to 10 days. 0 students suspended for 4 to 10 days and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. 20 students expelled out of school for 11 days or more. 0 students expelled out of school for 11 days or more and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school." Item number 5, the authorization to enter a contract with Teach for America was pulled from the Education Report Agenda Review for additional discussion. Additionally, item number 7, the authorization to schedule a public hearing to receive public comment on the closing of Pittsburgh Woolslayer K-5 was pulled for further discussion. We will begin with item number 5 and then move to number 7, and Dr. Lippert, Dr. Lane. Dr. Lippert.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. I did want to bring to the board's attention some detail around number 4, which is the Peterson Event Center around our graduation in June. If you turn to that page with me, it's 2 of 10. And nothing actually changes in the tab in terms of the amount that we're asking you to approve. However, on page 11, if you flip to page 11, it's not numbered. You have the graduation schedule as attachment 4A. And I would like to amend the times of graduation on Sunday, June 8th, to the following: Sci Tech, would be graduating at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. I'm sorry, that's Kappa. I'm sorry, it's resequenced here. Kappa would be graduating from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Sci Tech from 3 to 4. Obama, 5 to 6. And Alderdice would remain 7 to 8. And those are the changes in the attachment. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Lippert. Did everyone get that? On number 4? Okay. Mr. Brentley, please.
Doctor, I had made a request at the agenda review if you were able to check with the Peterson folks to see, since we're great partners with them, to see if they would allow our parents for those 2 days, 1 day during the graduation, if they would allow us to have free parking to our parents. Do you have a response? Hold it, I want to give you a drum roll first.
We don't have a response this evening, but we are committed to continuing to work. It doesn't impact your vote, but we are in conversation and do intend to continue the conversation with them, and also potentially, if we can't negotiate some parking vouchers or some arrangement, maybe that there's some other in-kind service that we could negotiate. So we'll keep you apprised. It still doesn't impact your vote here, but we're working on it for you.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Doctor, and I am. And hopefully, if they are listening or watching, it would be a great gesture to a community partner. It would be a great gesture on our part to offer to our parents, to get the parents to participate more and to come out. And also, it allows us to be mindful that, yes, in some families, the difference of a parking fee can make a difference on the number of people that can come out and support that particular child for graduation. So we're confident, Doctor, that you'll stay in negotiations with them and they'll open up. It would be a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a cost to what we are paying to the Peterson Center. And for us to continue to be great partners, it would be a great thing, hopefully, if they would consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. We'll move on to item number 5, the contract for Teach with America. Mr. Brentley, would you like to start?
Yes, I have, first of all, I just have just a couple of comments I just wanted to make about to the outgoing board members. And I just want to say that, you know, we sat at this table, there have been many, many battles, bloody battles here on a lot of issues, and it's no secret that I disagree with 80% of the things that most of the outgoing board members have put forward or fought for. But the big issue here is the fact of the matter is that they showed up and they volunteered, and that's important. There are a lot of people who often talk about things, but you don't give up. You don't give up the time, and you don't know what people go through to sit at this table. So I really get worked up over that because it's difficult volunteering and being beat up most of the time. So the fact of the matter is, I think I counted up 58 years of volunteer service on the outgoing board members. But the flip side of that is that I got to tell you, whenever it's my time to move on, and if the staff attempt to do to me what they're doing here this evening, they're going to hear from me. Ms. Fink, I disagree with you most of the time, but you do not deserve this with 30-plus years. You know, I was just looking at some of the issues before us today. This should be your meeting. We should be celebrating all of these years. But look at the hot-button items. We got to do controversial issues with Columbus. I mean, with the sale of Columbus and the Propel issue. And there's the Teach with America. There's a personnel issue that's going to come at the end of the meeting. There's the closing of Woolslayer. There's the CSI issue. Look, I got to tell you, this should be the time where we say, look, you know, we should be hearing Gene Fink stories, you know, 30-plus years. We should not be, and our staff should have not put these hot-button, bloody issues before us, because unfortunately there is a possibility that the public will see your final action, your final roll call, as voting against something that the community feels very strongly about, number one, and number two, that at least 4 of these items were so divisive. And so I say that from the bottom of my heart. Ms. Fink, I'm going to try something, and maybe you can, it'll be the first ever. I am going to try, when we get to these items, to put a motion on the floor to table for further information. Now, that does not mean that you are walking away from your responsibilities, and most people know you, Ms. Fink, you've never walked from anything, and you don't run from anything. But to take your moment away from you, I have to speak up about that. Not just you, but all of you. So what I'm going to try to do, and I know often that the code around this table, whatever Mark puts on the floor, you ignore it, or you never second it, or you never agree with it. But for the sake of volunteerism, people who give up time, and we give it up here, big time, for the sake of having the final meeting of a 30-plus years of service, I will make a motion that we table the item, and I'm hoping that my colleagues would agree with me. And tabling it just simply means we can bring it up next month. We have a very, very strong incoming board who would probably love to share some of their comments concerning these items. And I had to say that because I looked at it on my way coming out today, and I said, you know something, nobody deserves to go out like this. So, Ms. Fink, I'm directing most of my comments to you because 30-plus years in your leadership ability, sometimes what you do, others follow behind. And so, for the sake of keeping your final meeting smooth and civil and allowing folks to enjoy your time that you put here, I do want to offer that. So if it is appropriate, Madam Chair, I'd like to put a motion on the floor that item 5, which is Teach for America. There are a couple of them. I'll read them all again, and if I forget them, somebody else add them in.
Mr. Bentley, before you make your motion, can we get 2 points of order? Because I think both Mr. Sumter and I have questions that are relevant to your motion.
Okay.
And they're for Mr. Weiss.
Okay.
Mr. Weiss, if any item tonight is put on the table, who can bring it back?
Well, I mean, you have a new board coming in a week. Certainly any individual who is new to the board could bring it back. And any individual who would vote in favor of tabling could bring it back.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Mr. Sumter?
The comment that I wanted to make, or at least question that I would like to have answered, is if we could go around the table and get all the comments first, because I was thinking along the exact same lines that you were, to put forth a motion to table, but I'd rather hear everybody's comment first and then put forth the motion, but you could do it then. I think sometimes what happens is that when a tabling motion comes at the front end, that the conversation is not shared or understood by all board members. It stifles the conversation at that point. So that's all I would ask, that we go around, get the comments first, and then come back with a tabling after that.
Well, I appreciate that input, Mr. Sumter, but I wouldn't support that because going around the table is doing exactly what I was hoping that we not do. We're going to open up a can of worms, man. It's just nasty. It's divisive. Your phone is jumping off the hook just like mine was, the email, and certain folks corner you to giant eagles concerning this and concerning that on a couple of these issues. So for us to go around to begin to express our concerns based upon how we were approached, it puts it out there. And some of these things, I think we don't do the right thing when we don't allow full community input, and expressly allow the incoming board. So, I mean, I appreciate it, but I would not support that, and I'm hoping that it would just be just that. Let's table it, let's bring it back up at a later date where the community is involved, others are involved, but let's not ruin this wonderful final moment. That's my thinking, so.
He did make it, didn't he? That's what I was going to ask for, a second. Did you make the motion, Mr. Brentley? Did you or not? I'm just asking.
I can make the motion. And I have a couple of the items that needs to be,
Yeah, can we do one at a time?
Okay, we'll do one at a time, okay. I'd like to make a motion that we table number 5, I believe, which is the Teach for America item, for further review.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Do we need, Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call on a table of item number 5? Mr. Sumter has a point of order, please.
Mr. Weiss is
Priority motion, there is no discussion.
on a tabling
On a
motion.
tabling motion.
On a tabling motion, there's no discussion.
Right.
So if anybody were to say anything in support of tabling it, that can't be discussed.
You either vote, if the motion to table is defeated, then the discussion continues. If the motion to table is granted, approved, that's the end of it.
True, that's okay, but after that, if it were to fail, you could not bring tabling up again on this item.
No,
Okay. Thank you.
not this evening.
Not this evening.
Right.
Okay.
Explain that to me again. I just need to be clear.
You can't, I'm sorry, ask your question.
If it
I
doesn't,
apologize.
if it fails to be tabled, then we cannot, then it automatically goes forward?
Well, if it's not tabled, then the matter is before the board for discussion and a vote. You can't table it, the motion to table twice. You move to table it, it's been seconded. If it's tabled, then that's the end of the discussion. If the motion to table fails, then it's on the agenda and the board discusses it and votes on it.
Then I think that we should have an opportunity to discuss it before we table it.
Yes. So can I just give, if you want to have discussion, then you do not table a motion. That's Robert's Rules of Order. Once that tabling motion is on the floor and seconded, there is no additional discussion. So I'm way out of Robert's Rules right now.
Well, I mean, I think you need the explanation, but are you withdrawing the second?
Yes.
And Mr. Weiss, to be clear, if anyone would have made the tabling motion and it had not gotten a second, some other person, or that person again, could make that same motion because it did not fail.
Correct. So right now, there's a motion and there's no second.
There is no second. Okay, the motion dies. Thank you. Mr. Brentley, you still have the floor on item number 5.
Item number 5, let me, of course, express my disappointment, but then let the battle begin, unfortunately. I will not be supporting this item. I think we clearly heard from the public. Anytime the public expresses their concerns to you and the numbers in which we were showed, you have to, as an elected official, you know, we can be tough and thugged out all we want, but when the numbers that were given to us, over 1,300 folks signed a petition, the countless folks who continue to contact us, and let's not forget that symbolically what Teach for America is starting to represent, which irritates me. And unfortunately, it's starting to represent an attempt to really break organized labor. It is an attack against organized labor, and it's doing it in a backdoor kind of way. And I really wish that we had the mechanism as a board to simply say, fine, Teach for America, you want to fight with the PFT? Well, we'll take the kids and let's step out. and let them fight. We should not be caught up into this or be forced to be caught up in this. And remember, the most important thing, and I shared at Agenda Review, is that it was said in the paper that one of the reasons why we want to Teach for America, it will increase our diversity. You know, oh, what a slap in the face. You know, I've been here advocating for this district to go after African American men and women. I know of some who applied for jobs, who have all the credentials, but it stops in our HR or for some other reason. And so the fact of the matter is, the reason why we don't have diversity, that this administration, along with the previous one, it was not a priority. It was simply not a priority. Secondly, we've never reached out and established relationships with those who are out there who are in the business. You know, we haven't reached out to engage those and say, hey, look, here's what we're trying to do. Will you work with us? But we immediately went to the media and said, look, it's going to help us to increase the diversity. Then another point that's important is it's kind of an insult to say we're going to get someone, and let's make it very clear, Teach for America candidates, their hearts are pure. I mean, they mean well and they want to do right. But this is the inner city urban environment, and sometimes you have to have the necessary skills to deal. And 5 weeks may not cut it. Okay, we just have to be honest about that. And to be able to say we can do that, and through our political power, we can get them in some of the larger school districts. You know, I just read a letter today in the Tribune Review about an issue with the Tribune Review, Teach for America. And it's controversial and it's divisive. And so I was hoping that we not kind of engage in it, but it's obviously some things that some board members want to do. I do not want to participate in it. I think some of their goals are kind of exciting. I had some concerns I've shared before, even in which the way we were contacted, it was presented to us in an executive session. I've been here for 16 years, and we don't have presentations in executive sessions. That's public. That's supposed to be on the education committee for the full public to view. It wasn't like that. And the young lady was very sharp and knew what she was talking about. But when I asked her the questions, how can you help us to get what we need, which is key qualified African Americans? Can you set aside? Oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. Well, can you help us to find someone? Would direct us so your little special pool? No, we don't have that. Well, I'm done. That's my concern. That's what we don't have here. And so we have to really ask, what is it that we're doing? The final point that I want to make is that in the newspapers there were comments made, we need them to fill some of these key positions. You know, I am not an educator, but I know an insult when I see one. And to say that, and to not say or to suggest that you don't have it in this great city, and you haven't approached the CMUs, the Chathams, the Carlos, and the IEPs and all those, and you haven't really worked with them, you know, it really begins to make a divisive kind of issue. And I just hope that we don't get involved with it, that we don't do it. And, you know, so those are my comments, and thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was hoping that tonight's meeting wouldn't last forever, but hey, you know, one more time, what's the big deal?
You should have seconded.
Everybody wants to talk about it, so I don't want to take that away from people. Anyway, I listened to the public comment last night, and I've done a lot of homework on Teach for America. There's this thing out there that for some reason Teach for America does not bring in qualified, certified teachers, which is the furthest from the truth. A great deal of the people that go through Teach for America do have teacher certification. This is over and above it. I'm pleased with Teach for America. I wish we could have done our Teachers Academy, but we didn't have that opportunity. But last night, one of the speakers handed us petition that was done online, and it had a total of 1,341 signatures. And as I sat there last night, I went through them. I couldn't believe where some of these people were from, and I circled them. There is 250 signatures alone that aren't from Pittsburgh. I mean, from Korea, from Mexico, everywhere but Pittsburgh. And then the ones from Pittsburgh, there's no zip code to know if it's really Pittsburgh or the surrounding area. So that we'll just say, okay, that out of 1,341, 250 are not from Pittsburgh. We know that for sure. And then 1,091 are. That's not a very big percentage for this city. I mean, it's not. And there's no way of knowing why. What was the reason why they felt a need to sign for this? I've been on this board for 12 years, and out of that 12 years, the number one complaint I've heard from parents, is that if there isn't a qualified teacher in front of them, it's a reason for them to walk. And I've experienced it myself with my children. I remember my son being in high school and not having a chemistry teacher. One sub after another sub after another sub, and I was involved with the board at the time. Easy for me to investigate why, and guess what? No chemistry teachers. We are trying to fill positions that are difficult to fill in schools that are difficult to fill. This is not a guarantee that anybody has this upper hand over any other qualified individual applying for a job in this district. No one ever said that. All this is giving us another opportunity and another door opened. And before everybody starts jumping all over this one, give it a chance. Because as easy as it came is as easy as it can go. So I am going to support Teach for America, but then I've done a lot of homework about them, and I appreciate the work they've done. And I'm not going to belabor this anymore.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Fink?
I appreciate Mr. Brentley's concern to make our last meeting a brief one, but I walked into this with a table full of controversial issues, and I don't see why the last meeting should be any different. So I'm certainly willing to sit and talk about whatever is on this agenda tonight. I just have a problem with this program that you're paying a little extra money to Teach for America to help recruit people, and then you aren't getting union people. And that bothers me. And you can't teach pedagogy in 5 or 6 weeks. You can be the brightest mathematician on the college campus, and if you don't know how to impart that knowledge to your students, then it's not going to do those kids any good. So I am not too keen about this. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Mrs. Azuda?
Some of the subjects are hard for us to find adequate staff to work both in the classroom and as substitutes. And so I am in favor of Teach for America because I think ultimately it gives our principals the opportunity to make a selection that is the best fit for their building, for that subject matter, whether the person is trained in the traditional or a non-traditional way. And I have to have faith in our principals that they will do that. They will make the best selection. And following that, they would be union members, just the same as somebody coming out of one of our state schools.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Mr. McCray?
Usually when it gets to me, pretty much everything's been said. But the way I see this is Dr. Lane's asking us to give her another tool to accomplish her goals on her contract, like we set the goals, we set the parameters. This seems to be a tool to do that. It's just there's a bunch of enablers out there trying to make a big fuss out of nothing. So I'm cool with it.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Dr. Hawley?
Thank you.
First and foremost, I want to say that I'm very disappointed that every time we need to bring in a major consultant to this district, that we use the poorest kids, the poorest children in this district in order to get something that we really don't need. I am very disturbed over the fact that this district would try and put a microwave teacher, somebody who has 5 to 6 weeks of work of how to teach children, into schools that are in desperate need of having a qualified teacher. You can't talk about an effective teacher program and then on the other hand, talk about a teacher that I can teach in 5 weeks to go in and teach children that are not making the grade to begin with. Everything that we get from this district into these schools is an experiment. And we're going to experiment on these children yet again. And now you're going to tell me you're going to put somebody in front of them that has no experience in teaching. I find that outrageous. As an educator, I'm just appalled that we're sitting here talking about putting in an unqualified teacher in front of these students. We just went over the metrics of how well poor and African American students are doing in this district. And you're going to tell me that a Teach for America teacher is going to be able to go in and do that? I'm here to tell you, no, it's not going to happen. And if you really wanted to have African American teachers here, you would have tried to keep the ones that were already here and worked with them. They wouldn't have left in droves. And that's exactly what happened in this school district. So I am very disgusted over the fact that we are sitting here trying yet another experiment on the children who can least afford it. And no one has talked about the 3 schools that are probably going to get these teachers, if we vote on this, are going to be schools that have a significant amount of special needs students in them. Nobody has talked to us at all about how you're going to train them to work with those students as well. We have a hard enough time helping the teachers who have been in this district, who are really certified, who have done the work. How do we make this work for them? Now you're going to tell me you're going to be able to do this with people who have had no experience in teaching anybody? That's ridiculous. And, you know, I talk about passion. This is passionate for me, and I'm very upset over this. Because I do not believe that this is something that this district should be now going down a path to work to bring into our school district. And Mr. Brentley, I am sorry that I could not second it because I needed to make sure that we talked about this, that the public understood the problems here. But I believe that you really should have waited until the new board came on. Not that I have anything against the board that's outgoing. This is something that we will have to deal with when the new board comes on. We're going to have to deal with this until the year 2017. These children will be stuck with these people until 2017. And I have nothing against Teach for America or the people that are going to be assigned to that project. And I'd like to know from Dr. Lane, we got this information in October, the end of October, right before the legislative meeting. We were coming in, and the Teach for America person came in and discussed Teach for America with us. How did they get here? We didn't even know that they were on the radar to come here and be a part of this district. People have actually been hired for these positions, not in the school district, but for Teach for America. We didn't even know this was happening. How could this happen?
Dr. Hawley, the fact of the matter is, we had thought about potentially using Teach for America for a while, and for the reasons I described. And I've heard some of you deny those reasons. However, we also know that in some of our schools, most of the schools have their positions filled internally anyway. There are transfers, teachers moving from one school to the other. But we have some schools where virtually no one applies to transfer into that school. And these are schools that end up with people that no other principal took into their school. And that's been a battle that we've been fighting for the whole time I've been here, frankly. That there have been schools where principals really don't get much of a choice as to who's coming. And we really tried to work hard to figure out a way to keep those schools from always getting the teachers that no other principal selected. We've not found some good ways. We've not been totally successful in doing that. And I know I'm personally tired of having high school students say to me, well, the teacher told us, I don't want to be here. And I honestly feel if a teacher feels they don't want to be in a school, they shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be there. And I just don't think it's fair for kids to hear that. And I know that some of our kids do hear that. Now, I understand that, we can debate about the ways of preparing teachers. Teach for America is a different model. We have right now a pre-service model where most teachers are trained before they go into the classroom. They receive the bulk of their training. For Teach for America, it's not that way. It's more, there's some pre-service, but there's also in-service training. And it is different. I'm not saying it's the same as what we've always done. And I am not saying every Teach for America teacher would be someone we'd want in front of students. I don't think that's true either, and that's why we still would be interviewing candidates for any position. Any principal would still be interviewing candidates. But as we talk about Teach for America teachers like somehow they're something incredibly inferior, I'd like to remind the board and this community, we have Teach for America alums teaching in our schools today, right now. And I don't think everyone always, as we talk about them, the way they're being talked about, I hope we remember that. The PFT has Teach for America alums that are a member of their union right now. They didn't break the union. That was not the goal. They came in because they were the kind of people they wanted. And frankly, I would just sum it up with the young lady that spoke last night. If you find a better teacher, hire them. Don't hire me. That's what she said. And that's what I feel about it. If we find a better teacher, we'll hire them. We'll hire them. But we can't allow kids to hear from teachers telling them, I don't want to be in front of you. I don't want to be in this school. That's not fair to them.
You're absolutely right. It's not fair to them. However, you told us that we were going to get more diversity with Teach for America. The people that came up before us yesterday, none of them were, I would consider, being diverse.
I wouldn't either. I didn't say that every Teach for America teacher is going to be a person of color. What I did say, though, is the pool of people of color that are in Teach for America is much larger than it is through traditional preparation institutions. Our chances would be better simply because there are more Teach for America teachers that are of color. And is it a guarantee? Mr. Brentley spoke to that. No, it's not a guarantee. And frankly, we couldn't put in place any requirement that we'd only take teachers of color, because we can't do that under the law. We still want to find the very best teacher, but are we interested in maybe accessing a pool where there may be some people of color that might be great teachers for our kids? Sure, I'd like to access that pool.
You know what? The problem that I'm having is that the assumption is that the colleges and universities in this, well, throughout the country, are not actually
educating students of color or making a diverse pool of students as well. And they are actually doing that if students want to go back and go through the traditional track. We've had that done in this district for many years. So I'm not understanding why we cannot go to the colleges and universities and ask them to restart those programs. Those programs worked, and they worked very well. And they worked in concert with qualified teachers that were already that we already have in our school districts, and they worked with them. So I'm not understanding why you're not using that model as well. But this is something where you're telling me you're going to put a teacher that only has 6 weeks of service, in-service training, and they're going to be able to go into these schools that are really hard to manage and to teach. But they're going to be able to do that. And who's going to help them? I'm not voting for this.
Mr. Eisler.
Just wasn't sure there. Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Last night's public hearing was interesting, and there were some phenomenal comments made. I have advised a lot of people to call the district to see if they can get a CD of the evening, because I think some of the comments made were very, very enlightening. Any tough issue is going to bring out both sides, and I don't want to quote people, but I was amazed at some of the things I heard last night, for good. And I, too, really am upset that we were never able to get our Teachers Academy going. I think it would have made a major difference in this school district. And we wouldn't be here tonight if that would have happened. But it didn't, and we have to move on. And in talking to a number of people from around the country and other districts who have used Teach for America, it is an alternative, it is a tool, as Dr. Lane has asked for. Again, there is no guarantee that we are going to hire any of them. If they are hired, it is a guarantee that they're going to be a member of the PFT. And again, I just think we need to take some moves that are going to help children. And I do think that this could result in helping children. And again, we all have our opinions. We all have our opinions. But to me, it's one other tool that has worked in districts. It can work in districts. And I would like to see it happen here. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome, Mr. Eisler. Mr. Sumter?
I think well, first thing, going alphabetical does present some problems, going in alphabetical order. And that's why I was requesting that the conversation be held first, because some of us may want to change our names to Aardvark next year and make sure we go first. But I think the conversation so far lends itself to why this should be tabled more so than not, because of the divisiveness on understanding or sentiment towards which way you would go with this based off of what we've been presented to thus far. The presentation for Teach for America should have been in a public meeting. It should have been held well enough in advance to give all parties enough time to get as much information as necessary about Teach for America from around the country. Both sides can be heard, which even lends itself to why it should be tabled, at least for more conversation or more information on this. I'm hearing new information just tonight about Teach for America. Again, it should have been a public meeting. I think this board could show a good faith effort in the transition from this board to the next by carrying on the conversation further. People talk about guarantees. There's no guarantee. Just because an intelligent person sits down for an interview, there's no guarantee that there's the follow-up that's going to happen. It's not like they can tell you of all the experience they've had, the situations they've been in, the circumstances they've tackled. They can't tell you that. They can give a good impression, and you can go by faith and hope that it works out. Several of the individuals who had been in Teach for America, it's interesting that the word passion kept coming up over and over again. It came up at Agenda Review, it came up last night, it's even coming up tonight. Those passionate people left Teach for America. If they were that passionate, why didn't they continue following their passion and helping children? I would not want to be in a situation which is similar to what the Academy was presenting to us with the looming furloughs, that we get good people in and they're all of a sudden gone. And who's to say that wouldn't happen again? But without a furlough, Teach for America individuals move on to other avocations. It conflicts with the fact that if we're putting an effective teacher in front of every student, and the talk of seniority and experience and matters of that this would be, in a sense, the reverse of that. The question begs now as to, is it possible to resurrect the Teachers Academy at this point in time? It's a question.
Dr. Lane?
I think it would be very difficult. I can't say it absolutely couldn't happen in any way, shape, or form. However, I'd have to, a couple things I'm thinking about. One, financially, because the Academy was a very, let's say, Cadillac model of residency. And at the time, that was several years ago, we had the funds available to do it. Since then, because, the grant has gone on, a good chunk of those funds have already been expended. So I couldn't sit here and tell you for sure, Mr. Sumter, whether that would even be possible from that aspect. The other one would be, we still have the same issue we had then, which is around if there would be any furloughs, potentially the Academy residents would be the first to go. And because it is an expensive model, we really could not justify spending the money if we knew that, these individuals would be subject to furlough as the last hired.
Thank you. Again, because of those who spoke last evening on such short notice, had they been given more opportunity, we may have more information on one side or the other. And because of that, because of the contention that's being felt tonight, and I don't necessarily draw the link between what is happening in our schools presently, that Teach for America is going to solve those problems. That's an HR issue regarding our workforce. And if we were to find, and I would have and suggest that students report any teacher that says they don't want to be in any school in our district or any class in our district. That should be grounds for having them move on to another vocation, because they're telling you up front, they don't want to teach our children. We need teachers that care about our children, teachers that are qualified and competent to teach our children before that. So that might be getting at some of the root causes of the problems we're having. Again, to fully vet this item that was not brought to the public in a public forum, that because of the timing of being less than a week away from new board members coming on, which is unfortunate that the item would come up at this time. I think some members of this board have rapport with the new board members coming on. I think if the facts are presented that whether it's old or new, board members share the same responsibility to do what's best for the district, what's best for the children. So again, I think in terms of passing the torch from this board to the next, I would most be in favor of tabling this item. It doesn't defeat the item. It still keeps it available for further discussion. But the alternatives to this item need to be flushed out before that's even decided. The lady from Carnegie Mellon offered her assistance and help in recruiting a workforce suitable for the needs of this district. That should not be just dismissed as a comment at public hearing, but perhaps taken up as a course of action that we could adopt. What are all the other ways of getting those individuals, aside from using just Teach for America? Are there any other alternatives to Teach for America? Does it mean up the recruitment efforts? And my thing is, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. Do it more intense. Do it differently. Do what's needed to be done to get the workforce we're looking to get. Take the efforts, not just a quick fix, which there's been articles written, there's been information provided, there is testimony even last evening about the short-term reliability of Teach for America workers, whether they've been successful or not. There's pros and cons on that. Therefore, I think the conversation should continue and not end tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Eisler was hesitant to quote people from public hearing, and I'm not so hesitant. I will quote Ms. Christina DiPietro. In part, that is why you are elected, to make difficult decisions that are fiscally sound and with integrity. And so, while I intend no disrespect to the oncoming members, we were elected to serve out our terms. And I'm here tonight to serve out my term. Any decisions made tonight do not end here for me. God willing, I have children in the class of 2017, 2020, and 2022. So I will be here for a long time. And so I am not taking these things lightly and without full thought and understanding of these issues. I believe that we have seen data several times that leads us to say that, or that implies that seniority is not correlated with effectiveness. I am not, this will not displace any teacher who is currently in our system. It will just open a pool of more selections. I'll quote another person if I can find it. TFA applicants for this year, 14% of the seniors at Howard, not 14% of the School of Education, but 14% of the graduating class at Howard University applied for TFA. 12% of the graduating class at Morehouse. 23% of the seniors at Spelman applied for Teach for America last year. And I'm going to quote Amy Malin on that one. That's phenomenal. We're not getting 2 people from those schools a year to apply and be in our pool of applicants. And none of this guarantees that those people will be selected. It's just a broader pool from which to select candidates from. And we all know around this table that I like numbers. So I had Ms. Folar, if you don't mind, pull some numbers for me, because there were a lot of people, specifically teachers last night, talking about how many high-quality teacher candidates are out there that the district should be tapping into. Last year, this school year, 2013-14 school year, there were 6 vacancies at Westinghouse, and there were 3 applicants. So basically, there were a pool of 3 for 6 jobs. At University Prep, there were 9 vacancies with 10 applicants. So basically, that was a 1-to-1 ratio. And so let's assume that all 12 of those people who applied were high-quality teachers. You still had 2 slots left over, because teachers don't want to transfer to schools that have quote-unquote high needs. They just don't. They would rather sit, and forgive me, but they would rather sit in the schools that are typically not as challenging. There's not a great number of people applying for slots at these places. And if you can get somebody in there, and I so wish that a master teacher at every school, at every high school, would apply for a position at Westinghouse. That would be my wish. Every school give up a master teacher and send them over to Westinghouse. That would ease a lot of these problems and help those children immensely. But that's not the reality that we're living in, at least not from the way I see it. So I have to support the chance to get a broader pool of applicants who won't tell children that they don't want to be there or they're a teacher because they get summer breaks, and who have content knowledge and who can push our children, my children, to the levels that they need to succeed as adults. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I just wanted to say we appreciate your comments, Madam President, but we cannot look past the big issue here. If Teach for America is the answer for the Pittsburgh Public Schools, then why not allow the public a full opportunity to engage? Why not allow the incoming board to engage? Why did we sneak them into an executive session for a presentation and not on the Education Committee to allow the public to hear them? Then what is it about Teach for America that they won't allow the public to engage them? You know, I'm not ready to close the door totally, but it's important that I hear from everybody. We did not get that. And so we would have never, ever tolerated this maneuver from anybody else, and then in a record amount of time get presented in this book for vote, because 4 outgoing board members are leaving, and we know we got to pile on because we can get the vote. Well, that's a disservice to the community. To me, it's borderline of not sharing the information the way we were elected to share, which is through the public first, and then to share it back in the executive session. The public don't know what was presented. And so we can sit and, we can talk about the numbers. The fact of the matter is we still don't have key qualified African Americans. And I can put out any day, I can bring 5 or 6 individuals before you who said, hey, I've applied, I've went there, I've tried this. Teach for America won't necessarily solve those problems. And yes, I'm well aware of the fact that you cannot specifically just go after African Americans. But something is wrong where they're not even allowed or not able to get through the system. So, if you were to throw down the numbers, my colleague, Ms. Glazy, actually went through and checked the petitions. Fact of the matter is, we blew it. This was not supposed to happen the way it happened. And so it suggests, the process suggests that there is something that we cannot allow to go public on, and so we have to corner everything in to present it to guarantee a vote. And that's what's before us here. I mean, we know that there are agreements made. We know that some, for whatever reason, have other commitments. And we know that. But the point that Dr. Holly made, and she is the only educator sitting at this table with over 30-plus years, and we managed to constantly throw out whatever she has to say. Nobody here is an educator. Nobody is a practitioner. No one stood in front of those classrooms, managed a classroom. No one was able to do that here. but we constantly ignore her input. And she was trying to make it very clear, how dare we, this board, bring in a teacher with 5 years of training and put 5 weeks, thank you, 5 weeks of training and put those in those buildings that need it. You know, that's the issue. Not going through the petitions and trying to look like someone was dishonest, or not throwing up some statistics to show that, you know, that's the issue. And so at the end of the day, we did not use the process that we use for other individuals, agencies, contractors, or service providers. We had a special process that we use for them, which is getting us to where we are now, which is causing all kinds of problems. It is divisive. What is the big deal of holding this item and allowing folks to really talk about? Mr. Sumter just said he learned something today. The public may pick up something, but when you push things through and then you force it on people, you know, you cannot help from looking at this issue as being a major race issue, because you won't tolerate it in my friend Mr. Eisler's holidays. They don't tolerate that, but you put them in those other schools where our kids need more help, and it's just something you don't do. So let's not fake it. The fact of the matter is, we used a different process. They were given the red carpet treatment, and in less than 35, 40 days, the item is in this book. Amazing. That's the problem.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. I'm getting...
Okay.
Dr. Lane.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to correct a misperception, perhaps. The first notification that we sent to the board in regard to our interest, intention, however you want to describe it, about Teach for America was March 8th, 2013.
It was in a board update, and it came in a board update before we had them in executive session. Dr. Hawley.
Still doesn't answer the problem.
I know, but, you know, I'm going to have to... If that were the case, then why were they never brought to an education committee meeting? I mean, why weren't they brought before the education committee meeting and given an opportunity to talk about their program?
No, I'm not saying it couldn't have been. And when it was presented in March, I did not get an impression from any board member that it was any way, you know, I got no negative feedback, that it was in any way controversial.
Probably because they did not give a presentation to the board. If you're just talking about something in casual, just talking about a particular program, that's one thing. But when you bring it to the education committee meeting, that means that it's serious, that you're going to bring it forward, and that never happened.
We'd been more than willing to. I didn't have a request for that until just now.
You know what? Since we don't... okay. So who was the chair that should have brought that forward?
Dr. Hawley, Dr. Lane just stated that she presented it to us in March and no one seemed to object. This is a $150,000 contract? 700, I'm sorry. There are a lot of items that don't come before us in committee, but come to us on agenda. And so with no one having raised that issue until tonight, no one on their side of the table would have known to have put it on a committee agenda.
I'll let Mr. Brentley answer that.
No, I think we're getting off point. You know, we cannot justify this, Madam President. The fact of the matter is, there is a serious question of did we violate the Sunshine Law? Let's just put it out there. Mr. Weiss, based on that law, what is your legal opinion as to how this item was handled?
Well, much of the discussion in executive session dealt with the interplay between Teach for America and existing labor contracts. Obviously, there was some discussion about the program itself. These things often get interwoven, but certainly last week at the agenda review, last night at the public hearing, and tonight there is a full discussion, and so I don't believe if there was a violation, it's certainly been cured by all this discussion, which is now very much in public. So obviously, the issues that we discussed in executive session relating to how this interplays with the labor contract, what about layoffs, seniority, things like that are appropriate for executive session. Where the discussions about the program, yes, it all got interwoven. But again, there's been plenty of discussion last week, last night, and tonight. So I think the public is fully aware of the issues, and the board can proceed with this as it sees fit. It's on the agenda. We had a motion to table. It was not seconded, and it's before you now.
Mr. Weiss, but the question is, when was it presented before this board, and was it or should there not have been a presentation before the public? Remember, the Sunshine Law, if I'm not mistaken, is suggesting that we are meeting and talking about a key issue that should be discussed in the public. That item was not discussed, regardless of the administration sharing it with us. It was not a full-blown presentation to the public. That's what's in question. What we had in executive session was a full-blown presentation with a packet included.
Well, Mr. Bradley, I can tell you the discussion last week and tonight far outstrips that session in executive session. So I think the public is fully aware of this issue. They understand what the issues are. The board chooses not to proceed with it. That's the board's decision. But the cases are very clear that if there is public discussion and a public vote following this sort of thing, that cures the issue. So I think there can be no question that between last week, last night, and tonight, the public is fully aware of this issue, and each board member has had an opportunity to express him or herself on the issue.
Well, listen, excuse me, let me finish, please, Doctor. I appreciate that, Mr. Weiss, and I see you're not going to answer the question.
I answered.
Mr. Weiss, the question was timing. When it was presented. The public discussion last night and what we're getting, yes, the public is hearing it, but the timing in which it was first presented with the presentation in a packet is what's in question here. And what was presented at the executive session can easily be looked at. Was there some concerns of the violation of that sunshine law? Because that what we received at that executive session should have been presented in the public. It did not happen. And from that point on, it sparked other conversations, but we're talking about the first point of contact that we had, formal contact, with Teach for America. It was not the correct way, Mr. Weiss.
Well, I'm not going to debate whether it was the correct way. Presentation and deliberation are two entirely different things. The Sunshine Act says that deliberation, if there's deliberation on a matter that will come for a vote, it has to be in public. This board deliberated last week. It's deliberating tonight. What was presented to you at the executive session was a presentation. Should it have come before the Education Committee? That's a decision for the board to make. I don't make those decisions. I'm telling you, in my view, the process of discussion last week, last night, and tonight cures whatever allegation of a violation of the Sunshine Act occurred.
Okay.
That's my answer.
I understand. I'm going to move on. I think the public can clearly see what's happening here. And the unfortunate part is it happened, but not getting anyone to acknowledge the fact that, oops, we should have shared that public. That's a major problem. Mr. Weiss, what is the process? If this item comes before us and it passes, what is the process for a recall vote?
An item can be reconsidered at the next meeting, either way, if it's defeated or if it's approved. In either event, an individual that votes with the prevailing side has to make that motion. So if it would be approved, someone who voted to approve it would have to move to reconsider it. And if it's defeated, someone who voted against it, someone who voted against it would have to bring it up. So That's generally how it works.
How about if the new board members, would they be allowed to bring it back to the table?
Yes. Yes, they can. It's the same as if an individual did not vote. That's happened here before. So a new board member, a board member who is seated on December 2nd, if this is voted up or down this evening, or tabled for that matter, a new board member, having not had the opportunity to vote, could make any of those motions to remove it from the table or to reconsider it.
Thank you. I'd like to ask another question. Under the No Child Left Behind law, we're required to have qualified teachers in our classrooms. Can you tell me, did the Pennsylvania Department of Education agree that these teachers would be considered as highly qualified?
The Teach for America program is in use in Pennsylvania already.
Only in Philadelphia.
The Teach for America program is in use in Pennsylvania already. The type of certification they have is an intern certificate, very similar to the one used by the University of Pittsburgh in their MAT program. So in the University of Pittsburgh program, you can have an undergraduate degree, work on your master's degree, and work under the intern certificate, and this would be very similar to that.
Yes, but under the intern certificate, they do not get full wages. They don't get benefits. They just get a stipend. Paying them a full salary.
Yeah, but as I understand it, Dr. Holly, they do have to have the certificate, which is granted by the Commonwealth. And I don't know, Ms. Fuller maybe can explain more, because I don't count myself an expert, but if there's more to that, maybe you can add to it.
So I can reference the Pennsylvania Department of Education website, their guidelines regarding certification, and with regard to the intern certificate, which would be required of any Teach for America candidate selected and hired by the district. It reads, the intern certificate is a valid professional certificate that entitles the holder to fill a full-time professional teaching position, and it is deemed a valid professional certificate.
Certificate is not that the certificate does not go towards their being tenured. They have to then turn out to be a regular teacher because they went through the master's program and they got their certification at the end of that master's program, if I'm not mistaken.
So the intern certificate has requirements to it. It requires that you hold a bachelor's degree in the content area that you would be seeking an intern certificate. You must have a certain GPA. You must have taken a certain number of credits in core subject areas of math and reading, and it requires that you be enrolled and remain continuously enrolled in one of the designated 38 educational programs in Pennsylvania that lead to the Instructional One certificate. And so during that time period, the individual is fully certificated and, as it says, is specifically entitled to all rights, privileges of a professional employee.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, those interns that we had from the University of Pittsburgh that were master's level teachers, they actually worked with another teacher in our school district. It was almost as though they were student teaching for an entire year. They were not left alone with students from day one. They were actually in a room with a certified teacher where they did their internship. And I know that for a fact because I had many of them at my school. So I just we are talking about a qualified teacher in every classroom. And you know what? And I don't want to be disrespectful to you at all, Mrs. Shealy, but I'll tell you, in knowing you and how much you love your children and how much you believe in education, you are not going to have an unqualified teacher in front of your children. I know that for a fact.
I have, but Dr. Hawley, I think I mentioned at agenda review, and I'm sorry, Mr. Sumter, but that was addressed to me. I mentioned at agenda review that I did have one, because I got the letter. I got the letter. What's the letter called, Ms. Bolar? Do you know the letter I'm referring to? To which I'm referring?
So what you shared was that you received the parent notification letter that a individual filling a vacancy, a short-term vacancy in your child's classroom had continued in that spot, and therefore a letter was sent to you.
And so it was not short-term. It was, she had her for Spanish in 6th grade for 3 months, and she followed her into English for 7th grade for 8 or 7. So, yeah, I did get an unqualified teacher for my child. And no, let me rephrase that. I had a teacher who was not certified in front of my child. She was very qualified and capable of teaching. She was an excellent English teacher, a Shinley alum, and 8 books for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. She was an excellent teacher, spoke fluent Spanish, great, but she was not certified. And she might still be there, because she moved to French. After she left the English class, they moved her to French, from Spanish to English to French.
Sorry. Are you trying to tell me that we can't find certificated teachers that teach English and French in our schools? Oh, come on now.
Certainly not French. That foreign language certifications is one of the areas where we really do struggle. So the French would be a challenge for us. This was not a bona fide vacancy, just to be clear. This was an absence that continued for a time period, and that's the reason why the letter was sent. So again, when you are into substituting for individuals who are absent in the middle of the year, there are not always available individuals for those spots.
In other words, that just wasn't a vacancy. You're telling me that's not a vacancy? That's just a substitute?
It was not a permanent vacancy.
Okay.
There was someone who was absent and someone was filling that position.
Mr. Sumter? Mr. Sumter, excuse me, Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Time is not an issue because there are ways to put things in place to speed up time. Some boards give each member 2 bites of the apple, 3 minutes each time. That's it. Just like we give people a public hearing 3 minutes to talk, they can talk. That's all they get. So because we don't have that in place at this point in time, we can't necessarily say that. But I think it's more important that this board take as much time as necessary. That's why you table things, to continue the discussion at some later point in time. The fact that we've talked about this long tonight, whether it's the new board or this board, you have the same exact responsibilities. You can vote up, down, or table. Those are options available to board members. I don't think that hindsight is the justification or rationale for why we're at this point in time. Things happen from March to October such that in October, with a public hearing that last night, and then you're to digest all that and discuss it tonight, and at agenda review, the request was to pull. Either you bang it out at agenda review or you bang it out at both, but still, the procedures or how things were done have us where we are. The concern is that, again, more information's still coming out tonight. Haven't heard before, but more information's coming out, that we are given the necessary information to make intelligent decisions. And it shouldn't be to the point, no matter whether it's this board, next board, any board, the boards years ago or whatever, if the information is presented to you, you should have the fiduciary responsibility to make the best decision for the district. Because of the differences of points of view about this topic, to bring it to a vote tonight, only to, well, perhaps when we walk out the door, folks will be happy and collegiate about the situation. But to tick folks off one way or the other based off of it must be done tonight, I don't think is good business. And the opportunity to present whether it's one way or the other. The other point is the Teachers Academy as it was formally designed may not meet our financial capability at this point in time. But what's to say a scaled down model of such couldn't work, or any other alternative as far as recruiting couldn't work? So I think Dr. Hawley pulled it. I wanted to have it pulled for discussion, thinking that you could learn something. But because of the short time frame of this, the manner in which it was presented, and not giving the opportunity for more information to come in, I still would be in favor of tabling it at this point. However, if forced to vote, if that's what we have to do, then that's what we have to do. But it shouldn't be under these circumstances. Thank you.
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I just want to also mention that, yes, at one point we were going to have the Teacher Academy, but we never had, after we found out we could not, we didn't have the money for it. Why? Huh? Okay, but why did we not see some staff member be creative and scale down on it, but still presented something that would allow us to kind of still get the input, I mean the impact in terms of being able to train and to groom teachers, and would have been great if somebody would have put something on the table to at least give us something to think about. Instead, it was it, and we moved on. To move this issue forward, Mr. Weiss, you said those who are on the prevailing side are the ones who have the right to bring it up again. Is that correct?
Yes, or those that didn't vote, which would be the new members.
Okay, so either a new board member can bring this up, one of the incoming board members, by the way, who will be here in less than 10 days, and so to hold something, that shows you how mean some of the folks are here at the table, and how difficult it is to get quality education for poor people. That's what that shows you. So an incoming board member, a new board member, can put the item on the table?
Yes.
Okay. Or anyone who votes in the prevailing side can also bring it up?
Right.
Okay. Well, what I will do, I will be voting in the prevailing side to allow my incoming colleagues an opportunity to have their input into this process. Secondly, it would allow the public to be a part of this, and we'll do that immediately. So to the viewing public, my vote simply means I'm opening the process for full public view. I'm not in support of what is before us today, so please understand my vote. We cannot ignore the fact that in less than 10 days, my colleagues who are here, sitting over on this to my left of me, I believe have a combined experience of nearly close to 40, if not over 50 years of service as educators, and to deny them an opportunity to weigh in on something so very important. Those in the viewing audience, you don't understand how mean it is here. I mean, less than 10 days. I am certain that those three individuals coming in can probably share some of their classroom experiences, some recommendations. They can also partner with Dr. Hawley, and you have almost 70, 80, 90 years of experience. Any other school district, we would pay y'all for that, okay? But any other school district would welcome that. In this district, we don't. We don't. So to move this item on, when the vote comes, I will be casting a yes vote for my colleagues over there, because I'd love to hear your input. I'm finished with it now.
No.
I know. Mrs., let Mr. Sumter go, please. Mr. Sumter. And please, can Mr. Sumter have the floor, please?
I would like to put forth a motion at this time to table this item.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Yes. I second it.
Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call on the motion to table item number 5?
Yes.
Swayze?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Zuda?
No.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisner?
No.
Ms. Gray?
No.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
No. Thank you. Can we move, are we done with item 5? Can we move on to item number, is it 7? I'm sorry, I've lost track. I can cross filibuster off my bucket list. Item number 7. Resolve that the Board of Directors of Pittsburgh Public, the School District of Pittsburgh authorizes proper officers to schedule a public hearing pursuant to the code to receive public comment on the closing of Pittsburgh Wolfslayer effective July 1st, 2014. Mr. Sumter, would you like to start?
Thank you very much, Ms. Shealy. This opportunity doesn't come by often. In 8 years, it's probably the first. After discussion, I will put forth a motion, if nobody else does, to table this item also. However, I would like to hear the discussion first. The concern here is that I would like to see this item put within the context of the entire district, not just in and of itself. The interrelatedness of our school system is paramount. Any action we take, even if a teacher moves from one school to another, or we make a change in feeder patterns or close one school or keep it open, has a ripple effect throughout the entire district. The constituents of the Bloomfield, Garfield, Lawrenceville area would like, as other groups have throughout the city, to have the time to develop and flush out a plan, and we as board members perhaps would want that also, to determine the overall positive recommendations that can be made for that area, just as well as we would do for Homewood, East Liberty, South Hills, North Side, West End, East End, Hill District. That's one of the problems we do have throughout the district, is that there are these pockets or neighborhoods or communities that are working specifically for their own communities or neighborhoods. I would like to see an interwoven format such that when everybody makes decisions or thinks about what's going to happen in Pittsburgh Public Schools, that they look at it as a system first and communities second, to have everyone on the same boat rowing in the same direction at the same time. That's a goal, or that's something that we should aspire to have. So if we start the process now on the closing of the school, it's thought that there might not be enough time to flush out a decision regarding that. So I'd be in favor of not voting to close Wolfslayer at this time, but more in terms of tabling this item, but then wanting to see the overall context of other measures that would take to make the district fiscally sound and improve education throughout. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Eisner?
Thanks, Ms. Shealy. I agree with many of the things Mr. Sumter said, and I think one of the most difficult decisions any board member has to make, and some of us on this board have made a lot, is to close schools. It is never pleasant. This does not vote to close the school. It begins a process. Dr. Lane, how many students are currently in Wolfslayer?
110.
How many students are signed up for kindergarten next year, actually registered?
We haven't completed kindergarten registration for
understand.
next year, but we do have 11 students in kindergarten today.
We know what the looming fiscal debt is for this district, and we know what it looks like. We also know that last year we raised taxes in this city. And I have gone on record, and again, I will not raise taxes this year. We voted unanimously last year to raise taxes. We're not looking at major increases in the state next year, and we know sequestration is going to hit us again, and hit us where it really hurts in the early childhood programs. We have to look at every single way this district can attempt to save money. And unfortunately, we right now are in a time when people who are paying taxes and a lot of other people are questioning the costs of governmental organizations, including this school district. We have one of the highest costs per children in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's thrown up at us all the time. And I see this as a process, and a beginning process, and I am all for the community coming forward and trying to come up with alternatives that we might not have thought of. But we have got to do something to get our budget in order. The incoming mayor has promised to help, and I believe him. But it is going to take a couple years to work this out. And I think that what we are doing is taking a look at one piece of what we have to do as a board to be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers of the city of Pittsburgh and provide a quality education for every child. But this is not a vote to close the school. It begins the process. And hopefully in that period of time, not only the community and the citizens at large, but also all of those people who help fund public education will start working with us, including the parents. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome. Dr. Hawley?
I agree with a lot of what Mr. Eisler has said, and also I agree with Mr. Sumter. However, the problem here is I'm always looking at history. What has the district done in the past? And we've actually made this problem for Wolf-Slayer in terms of changing the feeder pattern, opening up an elementary school that we didn't need. But it's there. The problem that I'm having is that right now, when you start saying that we're going to close just this one school, parents that are normally there are now starting to scatter. They're now starting to look for some other alternatives for their children. I really do not want the school to close. I really think that there's something that the district can do and offer within that community some alternative programming so that we can have children that live in that neighborhood actually attend our Pittsburgh Public Schools. I do not believe that closures of schools is going to make that much of a difference in terms of our financial benefit. We were already told that it's only going to yield $600,000. $750,000 we're going to pay for Teach for America. I won't go down that road again. But I'm really concerned about the fact that we're willing to isolate just this one school for this year to talk about closure, when we should have been doing this as a group, or we shouldn't have done it at all. But we need to start looking at how we can develop programming in different neighborhoods so that we can get students that are in those communities to attend our public schools. If we want to be a school district of choice, we have to start developing programming for our parents. And that's something that this district is not doing. We are always working from a deficit model. And until we start to look at it as an asset and look at it as developing different types of programming for our young people, we are not going to get our parents to start using our schools as the resources that they should be. So I am not going to vote, I can't vote to close this school or any school until we actually start to look at how we're going to develop programming in our schools. Thank you.
Mr. McCray?
I agree with you, Dr. Hawley. I think we need to make our schools more attractive and bring children back. But this is not a vote to close a school. It's a vote to open the conversation. It's a vote to sit down with the community and engage them and say, how can we keep it open? Maybe they've got great ideas out there that'll keep it open. Fine. But that's what's going to have to happen in March, I believe, the vote, to actually do the closing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Mrs. Suzuda?
Just Dr. Hawley talking about history, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but some years ago, at least one of my children went to Wolf-Slayer for elementary scholars. Where did the students from that neighborhood go to school at that time, when Wolf-Slayer was the elementary scholars site?
They went to Friendship and they went to Fort Pitt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I just ask, was Wolf-Slayer a complete scholars building?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then
Thank
they
you.
moved it to Banksville, I think was the next stop. And then, yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mrs. Scalise?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to take too much more time on this subject, too, because there's a lot more in this agenda this evening. But I think that no matter what you do when you sit in these seats, it's never the right thing that you're doing. Somebody's always got something to say about whatever decision it is you make. But this one has me surprised more than anything, because this is to open up discussion. The public cannot come out and talk about this, and for the board, whether it's this board or the future board or any future board, can ever even make a decision on closing a school if you don't first take this vote. And I don't think the people understand that there is a process that we have to abide by law. So we have to take this vote tonight just to allow public comment. This is not about voting to close the school. That's not at all what this is about. This is about allowing the public the opportunity to discuss it. I think the law is very clear. It makes sure that school boards enforce the public's discussion so that nobody could turn around and just say she brings it up and the board votes on closing the school without discussion. This is actually a good thing. So that doesn't mean that anybody's going to be voting to close Wolf-Slayer. It all depends on what happens from this point on. But to not do this is shutting the public up. It's shutting the public up. So I think that this is a no-brainer. I mean, this is to open up the discussion and see what happens. This isn't the board that's voting on closing this school. Although my vote was good for 12 years, all of a sudden it isn't, and Mrs. Finks was good for 34. And sometimes it's very insulting when people say that. Very hurtful as well. I'm done.
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I also want to just mention, but what is also equally hurtful is when comments are made that are often misleading. And so to the public, you can't allow anybody around this table to flip the script on you. The fact of the matter is, for us to be able to close Wolf-Slayer, the first step is this item. Secondly, to have that community to make public comment or to engage them or to talk with them, you need no item before us to vote on. They can do that at a public hearing, okay? Or they can engage us by coming to a meeting. So let's not get fooled here. Thirdly, you have to also be aware of my good friend who often throws out those scare tactics. You know what I mean? The fiscal condition of the city. I'm not going to raise those taxes. And the cost per student in this district. Well, let's see how fiscally responsible folks around this table can be on the next item. When their friends can come and get access to a campus, Columbus School, for, how much? $915,000. Okay, how much do we owe on it? Over $600,000. Wait a minute. You're going to walk away with that campus for a little over $300,000, taking that away from the students. And we're going to talk about being fiscally responsible. Don't forget the trick at Chinley. Don't forget the trick at Reisenstein. If we only thing we have that is of value are our facilities, I don't support selling most of them, but at least get a fair price. At least, and let's begin to dwindle and knock down some of this deficit. So please, don't let nobody trick you here. If it wasn't important, well then don't put the item before us. Don't put it before us. But they know that you have to do this by law. You have to do this first to advance the discussion, and then it comes up before a vote. If this wasn't before us, then there's no deadline of March or whenever the next 3 or 4 months. There's no deadline. We continue with the discussion. I won't be supporting it because, like the previous administration, someone just wakes up one day and says, I think I want to change that school to K-12. No, I think I'll change. I mean, no rationale, nothing, and no one keeps in mind that you're hurting children. And a lot of folks get angry, and what they simply do is they just pull their kids out. Out of the 110, if this goes through, how many of them will end up at Arsenal? How many will you lose? As an administration, show me your transition on how you're going to nurture those parents to bring them so that we can keep them. Or is this thing just another big hit on knocking down the public schools to open up for the other entrepreneurs that are interested in the charter? That's what this thing is about. And so you cannot simply be fooled. Not to mention that the wonderful, wonderful comments made at the public hearing. My slight disappointment is I'm so thankful that the folks came out, but we didn't hear you 3 or 4 years ago when this administration, previous administration, just ran out of control in the black community, shutting schools down, putting our kids, busing them all over the place, and some schools stacking them on top of each other, like the old saying goes, like a slave ship on dry land. Our kids are in these facilities, and we didn't hear anybody. So I'm still advocating for everyone, but we got to drop this race line. You should be outraged if anybody's child is inconvenienced regardless of the color of their skin. And what we seen last night were my white friends, and I'm thankful that they came forward, but don't just stop there. There's a lot going on at this table. Very little of it has anything to do with education. And to solve this issue and to stop the bleeding, we are going to have to band together. That's parents from the north side, the east, and all over this city, the black ones, the white ones, the old ones, the young ones. We have to stand for children because there's a movement here, and you will see these items that are before us, and you got to say, who would do this? And so it's a much, much bigger issue. I don't support it because you don't do a school as a standalone school. I want to know if you're going to close a school, you give me an impact. Who will it impact? Who are the winners? Who are the losers? How are you working with that community to continue to make them whole? And you tell me how everything, it's a piece, it's a puzzle. How does it fit? We don't get that. And then we're supposed to support that. So please don't be misled by folks who call themselves concerned, but nevertheless, these items coming before them, they'll vote for them. You won't hear it being fiscally responsible on that mess, and we should never have this item before us. Thank you.
Mr. Joseph, for clarification, the savings that you projected at potentially closing Wolf's Lair was $600,000 singularly or per year?
That would be a recurring annual cost that would represent the reduction in some administrative staff as well as utilities and custodial savings.
So over 4 years, that's $2.4 million.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. I think items such as these or the comments that have been made lend towards the problem in this district. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. Something has to come on an agenda for us to act on it. Why isn't the discussion before that of how to improve the schools? And that might come up as one of the recommendations before it's even recommended to the board or suggested. So engaging the public and the board well enough in advance as other items on here either were or weren't, puts us in a better position, because once you start the process, some families are going to say, well, they're going to vote to close it anyway. I need to get out now. I need to go to the magnet fair. I need to find another school for my child now. Why should I wait till March or next year to see what's going to happen or be in a bind? So if the conversation was about how do we improve the education outcomes in the Garfield, Lawrenceville, Bloomfield section of the city that includes Montessori, Fort Pitt, Woolslair, and Arsenal, in the conversation, in the context, how does that affect feeder patterns? How does that affect transportation? How does that affect offerings? Should we put all the kids in Fort Pitt? Should we put all the kids in Arsenal? Which way should we go? Rather than pick the low-hanging fruit or the trial balloon and say everything has to be predicated on that, and it just reverberates around that one school and out of context of the district. Being proactive, we might hear comments from the public well in advance of just putting them through a 3-month process. We might hear comments year-round if we're proactive, sharing information, getting everybody in the same boat, rowing in the same direction. How can we all save money for the district? How can we all get effective teachers in front of all of our children? How can we all make Pittsburgh a district of first choice? How can we all guarantee high educational achievement within the district, rather than, well, this school here, because of the cost, because of the situation, will save a little bit of money and we'll pick that one. But what effect is that going to have on the other schools in that area? What, in fact, impact is that going to have on other schools in the district? That's another concern regarding closing just a school or any school, that we need to look at the history of how we got to where we are. What decisions were made that caused us to be in this position? What was the effect of closing Fort Pitt? What was the effect of trying to keep other buildings open? I want to say Montessori, but at the cost that we're going to render on that building, would it be better to put them in Fort Pitt? Would it be better to put them in Woolslair, put the Woolslair kids in Arsenal? Those kind of discussions need to be had, not just Woolslair in and of itself. You engage a larger community in the conversation. You're not talking to just the Woolslair parents only, and it becomes a more holistic conversation. It's more proactive rather than reactive. All the people in other schools, or the kids in other schools, or the parents of those kids, this is not their conversation. This is not their concern. It's only that school, those parents. And from what some of them have said, if you decide to close my school, which you often hear, I'm either going to seek out alternatives, either outside the district or homeschool my child or do something else. So it shouldn't be one school at a time, or it shouldn't, not to say that it would be that way, but that's what the circumstances of this decision makes. So at the close of this conversation, I'm going to put forth, or somebody else can put forth, a motion to table this item. Thank you.
Dr. Hawley?
I want to be clear. When the superintendent actually said that she was bringing in one closure. No. Oh, so I'm sorry.
No. Said at the close of conversation.
Okay. I thought maybe I was wrong. We were told that this school would be, she was bringing forth that this school would be closed. And the only reason why it's on the, to have us have a conversation now is so that we are in compliance with the school law. Before we can close it, they have to have so many days. So the parents understand that. It's not just about giving them an opportunity to voice their concern. The idea is that they're going to close the school. And that's why parents are very upset. And we could have done this. We could have talked with parents without saying that we're going to close the school. That doesn't make any sense to me, that some of my colleagues around the table feel as though this is a way of getting, a way to talk to parents and to the community about this school. No, it is not. The idea here is to give them the opportunity to talk, but we're going to close you after March 2014. Again, the history in this is, you know, it used to be a thriving school. We really didn't need 2 elementary schools in that community. This school was highly subscribed in 2006. As a matter of fact, 2 of their kindergartens, if I'm not mistaken, or 3 of the kindergartens, we actually had the house at Arsenal. But neither here nor there, we need to start thinking again about programming rather than just closing schools and communities. We really need to start thinking about building something rather than always working from a deficit. And I will propose that, I will make a motion that number 7 be tabled.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please, on the motion to table item number 7?
Mrs. Khaleesi?
No.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
No.
Dr. Holly?
Yes?
Mr. Eisler?
No.
Mr. McCray?
No.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
No.
The motion to table fails 4 to 5.
Is there additional discussion on item number 7? Are there any other items that that anyone has questions on in the education packet? Mrs. Fink.
I
That's
just
business.
want to congratulate the people that are becoming our partners with the CTE program. This has long been a goal of mine to see CTE come back and be the strong program that it used to be, and I think this is a very good start in the right direction, and I'm so happy to see the Carpenters Union part of it. It's dear to my heart. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Holly?
I too want to echo that I'm very happy to see CTE move in the right direction. I want to thank specifically their executive director, Mrs. Angela Mike, for her hard work in this area and progressing down this line. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mike.
Mr. Eisler?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Since I recognize the work of the CTE folks and Ms. Smike at Agenda Review, I will not do it again. But thank you, and Mrs. Fink did hit it well. I also want to note for the public, and it doesn't get noticed very often in these meetings, there are a lot of donations from a lot of people who support this school that never get recognized. And we have to be thankful that there are people who do support us with a variety of donations, both cash and in kind with gifts and services. So I want to thank everybody in this packet tonight that is giving to the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome, Mr. Brent. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. I just want to call attention to item number 6, which is the Early Childhood Male Fatherhood Involvement Committee. And if at all possible, there's a list of events that are going to be taking place from January through June of 2014. The one is Science and Movie Nights, January, April, and May. Readathon in February, March Dadness in March, and a summer kickoff be held in June. And if at all possible, if any of the board members of the public can attend or help support these events, it would be most appreciated. Thank you.
You are welcome. Mr. Brentley.
And I wanted to make some comments on number 12, page 5, and this is the different schools seeking association membership in the WPIAL District 7. And what concerns me here is that you can almost see how the district is just unwinding. Now schools can simply say, well, we don't want to be part of the City League anymore, and we want to be pulled out. And so what's before us here is Alderdice and field hockey girls. We have Brashear in swimming, boys and girls. We have Carrick in volleyball, girls and boys, and the swimming, boys and girls and boys. And then Obama in the volleyball in girls and boys. I'm not saying that it is not a good thing, but when you have a district that's just falling apart at the seams and just we continue to piecemeal things, somebody's going to lose. And so I would hope that my colleagues would join me in not supporting this item, but immediately upon getting the new board members, that we do a comprehensive, a district-wide athletic program that we can roll out as a district. We cannot continue to do what we're doing, and it becomes a disservice to some of our students as well. So that is another item, and that is number 12, and I hope those who are supportive of this would be supportive of simply either voting no. I would try to put a motion on the floor, but I know that the rule says you're not allowed to support anything I put on the floor, so I won't put that on. But it's always the right thing for kids, and that part I'm extremely proud of. So the most important thing, if folks cannot support that, but let's get it moving, let's put an ad hoc committee together, and let's look at the entire district. I think, and I think our kids can compete. I have no problems. I really do. But I want to see it as a district-wide thing and not allowing folks to keep doing little piece by piece. Thank you.
Dr. Hawley, I'm sorry, Mr. Eisler. Your microphone. Your microphone.
Sorry.
I just wanted clarification on number 12. The students at these schools, when you're talking about an associate membership, will they still be competing within the city with other city schools? And then these are add-on schools. They're going to add on to other schools outside of the city schools. I'm
going to ask Dr. Ware Allen if she can respond. Dr. Hawley.
Disadvantages of being short. This would give them the opportunity to play other schools outside of the City League of similar size for competition, in addition to scheduling within the City League.
So they will be playing other City League teams, but they're going to have the opportunity to extend that to outside schools.
The way it, particularly like for the example of Brashear and Carrick for swimming, those that are in the City League are already in WPIAL District 7, whereas the other teams from other schools, they don't have a team, even though Perry and Westinghouse will be other schools that are left in the city. Right now they're playing each other, so by moving to District 7, it actually allows them to play other city teams that are already there.
Seeing no other comments on the education report, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley?
Okay.
Mr. Brentley?
Does anybody wonder why we have 4 board members not rerunning?
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, but the flip side of that is people are angry. Okay, and regardless how people organize,
Are you voting?
I'm speaking and I have the floor, thank you. Regardless how people organize, the fact of the matter is they feel helpless when they come around this table and see corporations taking over this board. So quack, quack, whatever that meant, you know what I mean? It makes no sense. So I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at them. I'm going to take a little time here, Mr. Weiss. Number 5, I'm going to be voting yes for the quack, quack supporters. And that is on number 7. I'll be voting no on the Wolfslayer question. Oh, and then for the Teach America forced motion on us, I will be voting, no, I just voted for that. I think those are the 2 items. I am asking to reserve me because I may have to come back and add something, Mr. Weiss.
So let me understand. You're voting yes on 5 and no on 7?
Yes, and let me clarify. Yes, so number 5 is the Teach for America, right, to allow me to bring it up next month. And then 7 is no, that is the Wolfslayer closing, and there's some others, so I may have to come back.
How about the rest of the report?
For the rest of the report, I'm going to vote yes, but I'll be clarifying at the end of your rounds on the table.
Well,
You can come back and add. It's done many times here if you want to change something.
Well,
it happens often.
Well, we'll deal with that later. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Mr. Weiss, I will not vote until I have a clarification on that. If somebody already placed their vote, they can come back and change it? Please clarify.
Well,
it's been done.
I didn't ask. It's my turn, okay? I've already been insulted several times this evening.
Once the vote is announced, then the vote is the vote. So I really would urge the board not to start changing votes after the roll call, but board members are board members, and they want to
the right.
Try to do that, that's fine. So I suggest we proceed with the roll call.
So
Ms.
what's
Khaleesi?
the point of the vote then? Yes on the report as a whole. Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item number 5.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on number 5, page 2, and no on page 4, number 7.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item number 12.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item number 5 on page 2, and no on number 7 on page 4.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
And I do have an addition.
Mr. Bradley, do you have something to say?
That's correct. I do want to add on page 5, I want to vote no.
What number is it?
Number 12.
The report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Can we please move on to the Committee on Business and Finance? Item number 15 was pulled for additional discussion. Did I have the right number? I'm sorry. Mr. Brentley.
Yes, on number 15, and this would be interesting to hear my colleague from Squirrel Hill, how he'll respond to this one. This is an item where Propel School is attempting to purchase Columbus School. Columbus is one of the newer schools. It is a campus. What's interesting about Propel is what I raised questions about before. Since being on this board, we have voted on many, many charter schools. This is a school that manages to maneuver and get special privileges from this district. Their proposal is to purchase the building for $915,000. By law, we have to pay off the debt. The debt is over $600, and Mr. Joseph, $600,000, thank you. Mr. Joseph, what is the actual dollar amount that we actually owe on it?
1 second. $657,893, and that was as of September 30th, 2012.
Okay, so what would be the actual money the district would get off of that building?
It would be the difference between, I'd have to calculate, but it would be the difference between the asking price and the outstanding debt, so it would be under $300,000.
Under $300,000. And folks, once again, we're looking at another crime here. This is how you take a public asset. And if we're such in financially bad position, why are we not getting something closer to what's being... I don't support selling it, but why do we allow certain individuals to get access to these facilities for pennies? I keep reminding folks about what happened with Chinley, what happened with Reisenstein, and this is another perfect example. Also, you know the controversy around another item that Propel has managed to maneuver themselves in and trying to get before this board here. This is an item that should not be before us, but once again, thrown on this agenda because of the outgoing board members and how certain they are that this item will pass. How many additional folks will we have to lay off because we're not getting the right amount of dollars for what we're selling? So I will not be supporting it. We do give preferential treatment to some. It's wrong. We've allowed others to come forward. And I remember it about 3 or 4 years ago. I said before, a community group, a coalition of Northside groups wanted to get access to the building, and they wanted to lease the building where they had access to the gym to get some of the young kids off the streets. And at that time, I was told, and they were told, oh, we don't get into any leasing of our building. Propel managed to get the first and only lease in this district on one of our buildings, and what we were able to do is allow them to lease for 2 years. And we put thousands of dollars in maintaining and repairing it, and now here you are, have almost a practically new building. When we do sell buildings, it is an as-is sale. It is a cash and carry. But for Propel, we've allowed them to maneuver and to get the maintenance covered and to get everything put in place, and now they're going to get it for under $300,000. You cannot be talking about educating children when you're giving away a very important, very valuable asset. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi. Oh, I'm sorry. Can I go back to Mr. Joseph before you...
I'd just like to clarify that maintenance that's considered major, which is in excess of $7,500, is covered by an escrow fund that is funded by 25% of the proceeds of the lease agreement. Not all maintenance, just major maintenance in excess of $7,500. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Joseph, can you tell me what did we do over the last 2 years in terms of maintenance? What was the dollar amount spent on maintenance that we spent as a district?
I do not have that information at this time. I can get you that information at a later time. I can tell you that the balance in the escrow account currently devoted to major maintenance is $71,500. Thank you.
And so, but we did provide the necessary maintenance to keep the building, well, to keep the building safe and to keep it running.
Once again, I'd have to get you the detail of the maintenance that was provided, if there was maintenance that was provided. Thank you.
So you don't...
Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am torn on this one, and the reason I'm torn on it is because I really do not want to sell any of our buildings to a charter school, but at the same time, how long is their lease for, Mr. Joseph?
I believe their lease goes through July. It's a 13-month lease, so I believe it ends in July.
This coming July?
This coming July.
So there's a good possibility that when their lease is over, they could just leave and go rent another building anyway, and we'll be stuck with an empty building.
That's correct. They do have an option to vacate the building at the end of the lease.
How old is that building? Can you tell me? I'm sorry. I know.
I don't have the construction date off the top of my head. Let me see if I can actually find that.
Okay. Well, that's about a 40-year-old building. You know what? I'm done, Ms. Shilley.
Mr. McCray.
Thank you. I know the Northside Leadership Conference is very adamant about allowing this sale to go through, and the Central Northside community is in agreement with it, but I differ. I also, I'm curious, Propel is paying $915,000, correct, for this building?
Correct.
And the entire amount is going to be used to pay off our debt, if we decide to go with this.
Yes, if we decide to go with this, we'd have the amount that we'd have the $657,000 over that. That would be used to satisfy any outstanding debt, and the proceeds can either be used to further pay down debt or be used for capital projects.
That's unlike the sale of Chatham Elementary, which my colleague Mr. Brentley tended sort of brokered it, and we only sold that for $40,000, and we owed in the neighborhood of what, $1.3 million on it when we sold it. So giving something pennies on the dollar, let's get our facts straight and let's tell the truth. Thank you.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes, I'm not in favor of selling the building. I think that we need to start, I know we're not in the business of being realtors or landlords, but I think that we really need to start thinking outside the box. Our buildings that are able to be used for different purposes, we need to try and keep those buildings as assets. The building and the land is all we have left as our assets. So I'm not willing to sell this building, not just because it's Propel, but just because I don't feel that it's necessary for us to sell this building. Thank you.
Mr. Eisler?
Mr. Joseph, if the building is empty, do you know what the annual maintenance cost is?
Offhand, I do not have the annual maintenance cost.
Okay. Again, I don't like the sale of buildings either, but I don't like to have to pay on a building every single year when it's not in use. This building has been on the market for how long? Do we know?
It's been on the market for a considerable period of time, and this buyer is the only buyer that's expressed interest. This is our asking price.
What was the assessed value of it? Do we know?
Well, the assessed value is in excess of $10 million, but the county has not reassessed publicly owned exempt property for years. And that could very well be the construction cost of the building.
Going back to the 70s.
Those assessed values for publicly owned property are irrelevant.
What was the asking price from us?
$915.
Okay, thank you.
And they did not initially offer that.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Because we're talking about this one item, I can just say I'm not in favor of selling it. We are currently leasing this building. That may be a more desired option for me, is to continue that. I'm an optimist in thinking that some of our better assets we should hold on to, and perhaps some of us may not be here to see the day that the city is repopulated and the schools are, the conversation of this board would be which schools do we open, not which schools do we close. Thank you.
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I just want to, I wanted to respond to Mr. McCray and my colleague Mr. McCray's comments, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. so I won't respond. I want to make it very clear, though, that this item here, when you talk about scenarios and what could happen, keep in mind this district, out of nowhere, closed Northview Elementary. Those kids now are on the bus, they drive past their school, and we're putting them in Martin Luther King, and there are major issues there, okay? You now open up Propel, and so for Propel, who has positioned themselves to be the manager of poor people now, will have access to the entire building, and then all of a sudden, mysteriously, the building will be filled, except the only difference is they're getting paid. For an African American, to me, that is a modern way of dealing of slavery. When others did not have access to the building, but we allow one company to come and get it, we know the majority of those students are African American, they're poor, and so we're almost forcing them there. And as the old thing that was suggested by some who believe, and say, Mr. Brentley, you're going to have our kids there or in one of these charter schools, you let them age out, and then you drop them out. And on top of that, we're going to give them the building for under $200,000. There's something going on in this district. There's something that's going on, and it's moving so fast with forcing us to lay people off, to giving away the district's asset, and then positioning one individual to financially benefit off of our children. No other charter school applicant has been treated the way that we've treated this Propel school. And regardless of what Propel is doing outside of Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh they're failing. They did not make AYP. So now to have our children to be forced there, knowing it's failing, but the difference is one or two individuals can now make thousands and thousands of dollars off of us. It's a terrible example to talk about education. It's terrible.
Seeing no additional discussion. Yeah, can I finish my sentence, please? Seeing no additional discussion on this item, are there any other items in the business agenda that anyone would like to discuss? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, once again, you know, my colleague talked about being fiscally responsible. We have a couple of items here, and this increase to my good friend, Mr. Weiss, in our tax collections, it is an increase of, if I'm not mistaken, about $100, $150, $179,000, but it's an item. Should have been an item that we should have allowed ourselves, and I believe it's on the page. We should have had some discussion to see what we need to do. If it's true what my colleague said, that we have to watch how every dollar is being spent, we should have had an opportunity to sit down and to engage and see what can we do to bring that fee down, what can we do to try to do it better if possible. We didn't have that. Also, on the same page, number 20, the CIS, Corporate Security and Investigation. Now, this is also with Mr. Weiss's office, where the recommendation of hiring a CIS company to come in and to give a security view of what happened at Brashear High School. My concern, and Dr. Lane, I've asked you before, I won't be supporting this item, just for the simple fact that, as you know, that there was a report that was conducted about 4, maybe 5 years ago. It was entitled the Andrews Report, and they were looking at the security in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Previous administration did not share it. You refused to share it, but here we are spending more money to get someone to study a security issue. I am asking again, Dr. Lane, would you please provide that report to me and to my colleagues as well, if they're interested in the Andrews security report. It is named Andrews because I believe it's the name after the retired police officer who actually came in the district, and he gave his assessment of the security situation. We never seen it. and we paid for that. And so will you please tell me why you refuse to allow us to get a copy of it, this board?
Mr. Brantley, I've provided responses to you in this regard multiple times in writing.
Yes, and you said no. And I'm asking, Dr. Lane, that's a board property. We paid for that. And why would you not allow us to at least read it and see what we can add to the CIS contract if we have to? But why would you not share that information with us?
Mr. Brantley, I've really responded to this to you more than one time. And my response is not different than previous responses.
Okay, but Dr. Lane, that's not helping things. But you're asking us to approve additional monies, and it could be a duplication of service. It is a document.
This particular recommendation that's before you this evening is specific to this incident that took place at one of our schools. We are doing, of course, our own review of everything that happened, but we also think it is important to get outside eyes to take a look and provide anything that we need to know that we can learn from the incident. We believe our school police, city police, the district all handled it appropriately, and we wanted to make sure we documented how this was handled. But furthermore, we do want to see if there's anything else we might learn in order to, because we do have a high value on keeping kids safe. And that's the only reason I made this recommendation, because I thought there might be something that someone else might see that we could do better. That's the only reason.
And I can agree with that, Doctor, but I'm asking about the report that was already conducted by the Andrews Company. Why would you not share that? There's a possibility that we could learn from that, especially since we paid for that, and that confuses me. I don't know if it looked in as far as the Brashear situation, but I know it's out there and it exists. And one of the things that the board members rely on is we rely on information that we request from the administration. It is not the prerogative of the administration to decide what we should have and what we shouldn't have. If we request it, and if the information is available, it should be shared with us. And so, yes, I've asked you many times. Yes, you responded and you said pretty much the same thing, no. And I'm kind of offended by that because I don't know what's in it. And I'm here. I'm elected. I'm supposed to have all the tools given to me so that I can make a decision. But if you're going to withhold information, then my vote is not accurate. And my vote could be misleading. So I am asking you to provide that. I'm asking you to provide one to my colleagues in its entirety. That's owed to us. And I'd like to get it through you. There are other options. I don't think it's necessary. I don't know what's in it. I don't know what's in it. But we should at least have that before we move forward and decide to spend money anywhere else. I'm asking, will you provide that report, Dr. Lane?
Mr. Brantley, I've already responded to this to you multiple times, and we delineated in a letter the reasons why we did not think it was appropriate to do that. Now, you keep asking me. That hasn't necessarily changed. This is not my report. It was before my tenure. I did not initiate it. I did not ask for it. It's not mine.
Well, then that should even make it easier. Dr. Lane, this is so minor. We shouldn't have to do this. We should, if you just provide it, we need to know. If it's a security issue, could we have prevented something? We don't know that. And for someone to make the decision, you don't need that, it's just not a good thing. And so yes, you said many times before, and if it was the previous administration, then we need to see it. It doesn't matter. It's here. It's information. Can be helpful. That is for our decision and for us to make. And I've never had a superintendent yes, previous administration, he just simply wouldn't give you nothing and we're paying for it now. But it is a report and it is available. And I'm asking, Doc, I'm asking that we simply get that report. We deserve that. It's our report. It's the taxpayers' report. They paid for it. And I believe you should give it to us. I really do. And I understand. And that's one of the frustrations here. That's been consistent with your administration as well as Mark Roosevelt's. You've been selective on how you shared information. And some of us, Doctor, here, we're concerned. Some of us here. If you decide that I don't need it, then you're the board member and you're the superintendent. And that shouldn't be that way. Mr. Weiss, do you have access to this report?
The report was sought under the Right to Know Act. That was denied. The denial was upheld. It's an investigative report. There are personnel issues with it. There are security issues with it. It's involved in pending litigation now, and I've advised Dr. Lane that it is not appropriate for release. So she consulted me on it, and that was my advice to her.
Okay. What pending litigation we're not aware of?
With our former chief, which you are aware of.
Oh, with the chief? So you mean the case is still ongoing?
Yes. The case is in common pleas court. He appealed it, his dismissal, and he has now filed a federal action.
Okay.
So, yes, it is ongoing.
Okay. Well, then, this item that's here before us, we should not be voting on it.
Well, Mr. Spinelli, I would just like to address this. These are two entirely different issues. This particular item was, in my view, necessitated by the incident which occurred at Brashear. We have corresponded with the district attorney. The district attorney has expressed agreement with the district's handling of discipline in general. That was his public statement in response to some irresponsible comments made in other quarters about that. And I share with him that the board was going to consider having an independent review of the incident, both the one in October and the one this month. And he believed it was a positive thing to do. I think it's a necessary thing to do, and Dr. Lane and I have reviewed it. So these are two entirely different things. This is a very specific scope of work. What happened at Brashear? What was the response? Was there anything that could have been done differently or better? That's it. It has nothing to do with any previous study. So I don't want any misimpression to be here with the board. This is an entirely different thing. It's a cost not to exceed $4,000, which I think, given the circumstances, is a positive thing for this board to do, and I think it will address a number of concerns that naturally arise when you have a serious situation such as occurred a couple of weeks ago.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Weiss. It still has the same question above it, and that is this request has been made over 2-3 years. Prior to any legal action with any former employer. This administration, as well as the previous administration, simply refused to share the information. That becomes very dangerous when staff determines what we should have. Everything should be available, even if it's in its abbreviated form. This board should not be denied of it. If the legal issues are still going on, we should continue to be briefed, but if this information would help us to address something or to prevent something, no staff has the right to withhold a document, and I'm not sure if it's public, but a document that is paid for by the public, and the request is made by an elected member so that he can make the right decision. It's wrong. It's simply wrong, and it raises a whole lot of suspicion as to what other items were withheld, were there any other items that were withheld, and it also begins to nudge away at the relationship that the board should have with the administration. We're volunteers. We come here 2 or 3 hours before this meeting, and we have to consume tons of reports and recommendations. But if there's something that raises doubt, about its accuracy or someone withholding it, then it destroys it. And so I disagree. I understand what you're saying. It still represents the same problem. We should have access to it, and we should have had it probably a couple of years ago. There's no excuse for it.
Mr. Brentley.
Yes, number 7. This is the CPI Creative. This is for someone to do on-call graphic designs. Now, this is another item that was shared by our board member again about we have to watch every dollar. We have no one in the district who can provide these services, or have we ever checked to see if anyone can provide this service? And somebody can tell me, what is the total contract amount for this item?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the exact question.
The total contract amount for this item.
And I'll have to look at the item itself, which, just hang on one second. But back to your original question, which I believe you also asked at agenda review, we do not employ a graphic designer on staff. What we've done is when we have graphic design that needs to be done, it's been done by someone outside the district. Probably not enough graphic design for us that would justify a full-time position. Typically, this tends to be a more cost-effective way to do it.
And the total amount of the items not to exceed $85,000 over 2 years.
That's over 2 years, or that's per year?
It's over 2 years.
Okay, why is it 2 figures here? That's 85 and 80,000?
Because it's paid from 2 different account lines. So one account line represents printing that would be done for central office services, and the other account line represents various account lines that constitute a not to exceed amount of $88,000 that would handle different requests from schools or different offices.
Okay, and this is, there's a portion of this goes for printing?
It goes for graphics design and specialized printing.
Okay. And we have nothing in this district that can accommodate the printing?
We do standard printing. There's a copier, as you know, downstairs that does, for example, the printing of your board book. But there are some print jobs that cannot be handled that way, either because of the shape, the size, colors, whatever. I can't give you a specific example, but occasionally there are print jobs that, you know, have to be done outside.
Mr. McCray.
Thank you. First, I want to bring everyone's attention to the pieces of art that Friends of Art donated. I believe they're out in the hallway. Is that correct? Is there a way to get those posted online so people can't see them tonight can see them? And then I also want to bring your attention to our change orders, which is a negative amount this month.
Yay.
This is phenomenal. I think the facilities is doing just a tremendous job, and this is part of the board action, the superintendent's work to try and keep change orders down, because I pulled up some old documents here, and from 01 to 02, our debt service increased by about $12 million. Most of that was due to change orders, because if board members remember, monthly we were getting change orders to the tune of $2-3 million a month, until we started putting our foot down the following year between 02 and 03, $22 million increase in debt. I think we built Phase-On, or no, was it the okay, there was an addition put there. But again, part of this was due to the change orders, and the fact that the staff is now working so diligently that we're now in a negative amount this month for change order. This is fantastic. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Brentley.
I just want to, Dr. Lane, with the Brashear incident, there were city police involved, I think. Were there county police as well involved? with the responding?
Mr. Brentley, I can't name everyone that was involved, but I was told that almost every first responder in Pittsburgh responded. I know the FBI was notified. They sent people out. So my guess is, I personally saw city police, and actually the acting chief of police and the head of public safety for the city both came out themselves to Brashear. But my guess is, yes, I'm sure the Allegheny County Sheriff's Office was involved as well.
Well, I guess I asked that question to ask, have we thought about, do they have investigators who could have given, they were on the scene, who they could have given us a report as to what their recommendations are or were on how to change things? Look, they're saying, what can we do to monitor? It's a small amount, but it would have been a wonderful gesture as an intergovernmental cooperative kind of thing had we been able to say, well, you guys were there. Can you collectively provide us a report as to what you think went wrong? What can we do to make sure it never happens? Have we checked with them or thought about the...
It's my hope that we'll do that as a part of this. I personally believe it was best to have someone who was not engaged on the ground at Brashear to come in and take a look at things. Not that we won't talk with, debrief with City of Pittsburgh Police. I think that's always a good idea. And any other first responders that helped that day. And I did say, and I'll say again, how much I appreciate, the work that they did. But I do think for a relatively small amount of money, we can have someone that really is more focused on the district's response, not what the City of Police did or that kind of thing. And some of it I'm interested in is not really a police matter. And I gave an example to the board about communications. One of the issues is we met with the parents afterwards and kind of, talking to them at a community meeting was, could we have notified parents whose children were already at home faster? And of course the school was very much concerned with notifying the parents whose children were still at school as the first priority. But parents wanted to know, couldn't we have notified them faster what was going on? Because with media being what it is right now, it was up on websites before we could even get out to the schools. So it's things like that. It's not really the police part of it that, I'm interested in. And so I think that's just one example of one of the things we're thinking about, how can we do a better job of that.
Well, I understand that, but I just want to suggest, Doctor, that sometimes, we often go outside, but when we have the local talent here, the police department, I think they had a gang unit, so they understand that language. The county, I think, was working cooperative with the city. We could have benefited from dealing with our local experts. And that's all I was trying to advocate. Not to say anything about the CIS, but it could have been locally. It could have had folks who were there and who may have noticed things, who could have recommended, and we could have benefited from it. I think that I can't say enough about the stories that I've heard on how the staff responded. And it is my understanding that there was one staff member after the 2 or 3 individuals were shot, and we also should be aware of the fact that when they were shot, they didn't feel comfortable with going back to one of the homes or to hide in the woods. They ran for safety, and the safety they felt was in Brashear School. And that should tell us something about the district and about the school and about the staff there. But it is my understanding that a staff member immediately noticed that the young man was bleeding and he was shot, and without question removed one of our garments and began to stop the bleeding or to comfort him. And, unfortunately, that didn't lead the 6 o'clock news, but the other responses to others who immediately contacted other adults and contacted the police and directed them, we can't say enough about that. And when you talk about these kinds of incidents happening nationally, the others ended in a major tragedy where folks lost their lives. Thank God nobody lost their life. Yes, there were some folks who were hurt seriously, but our quick response with the local police as well as our staff it didn't end the way others. And so we ought to be thankful about that. We ought to continue to talk about that. I would hope that we would bring that young staff person here so that we can recognize them for what I believe could have saved the young man's life in terms of stopping the bleeding. So I hope that we would do that very, very soon, and let's continue to share with our other schools and other staff that this is kind of sort of how it works. They moved quickly and they made it happen, and it could have been much worse. So thank you very much.
I have to. I'm just struck. Mr. Sumter mentioned earlier about, I think, everyone coming from different perspectives. I am struck that no one has mentioned item number 16 in the context of sale of buildings, which is the sale of Morningside to the URA. Haven't I gone around yet? No. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. So can I just finish and keep moving? Thank you, Mr. Sumter. That this, the URA had the opportunity to market our buildings for years, Mr. McCray? Years, multiple years. And made no offers, made no moves to sell any building. Were not successful. They were successful in maybe one. We got a valid offer on Morningside at the asking price. Okay, can I finish? Can I finish so we can move it, please? We got a valid offer on Morningside from someone who was not the URA. And now the URA is asking to buy Morningside? That just bothers me to no end. Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Azuda?
I just want to say real quick something about the shooting that took place outside of Brashear. If you did like a yardstick, my house is probably closer to where the shooting took place than Brashear's physical plant. But fortunately, nobody's saying the shooting at the Hazuda House. What was some of our students involved? It was after school. It was outside. It was a unique thing for us to experience. Our staff responded admirably. They did a phenomenal job. The teacher, Mr. Brentley, was talking about, grew up in Beachview. I know him well. I can't say enough good things. All that said is it is a unique situation for us. And so for us to bring somebody in and look at the process, what could have been done differently, not that what was done was wrong, but where are our strengths, where are our opportunities for improvement? And so if we can learn this and prevent anything or improve our response if unfortunately something would happen again, it would be money very, very well spent. I recently had a conversation with somebody who told me that someone at Pitt's, I believe it's Pitt School of Education, was raving about the staff at Brashear, and in particular the English department, and the placement of student teachers in Brashear, and what a phenomenal job and what a great English department we have at Brashear. And that's the good stuff we like to share, but it doesn't make the news. So, I mean, I know if I talk long and loud, I must be right, so maybe not. I'll stop there.
Mr. McCray? Dr. Holly?
Yes, you brought up number 16. I have to say that the community really worked hard with the URA on this particular, the sale of this particular building. Morningside has been left empty for many, 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 many years, and it's an eyesore in a residential community. The residents there are trying to rebuild the Morningside area where there are lots of children, lots of community members that really wanted to work together in order to facilitate the selling of that building. So I support this, and I hope that my colleagues will support this, because this is something that the community really wants to do. They want something done with this building, and they've worked very hard with the URA to get this done. Thank you.
Mr. Eisler?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. And again, I think that in one of the executive committees, we actually talked about this. You might not have been there, but we went into some extensive discussion, which we can do as a sale of land. And the URA, the fact is, and Dr. Hawley is right, the community is very supportive of this. And I think most people feel that with the support of the URA, the development will really take place. And that's what people are most concerned about, that somebody doesn't buy it and then not do something with it. It is great when these sold buildings are put back on the tax rolls, and every one that was sold, everybody's had something to say, but and Mrs. Khaleesi's work to try to get South High sold, those apartments are all market rate, and you can't even get near the place. I mean, the waiting list is unbelievable, which has spurred a lot more development in the South Side, by the way, in terms of apartments. So I think this is really a good thing, and I think we have to move to it. And there's some other items in here that I won't go into great detail of. But, Mr. McCray, it was this board that actually took action on the issues dealing with cost overruns and passed the position that anything over a certain amount had to be approved by the board. That's when things really stopped down, when the board took action on that. So thank you for remembering that. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Question on item number 16, sale of Morningside. What is the appraised value of the building? Knowing that there are 3 ways to do an appraisal, valuation, market, and as-is, and I think we take the as-is value for all of our appraisals, but what is that amount?
I think the sale price, which is the minimum price we would accept, reflects the appraisal.
Okay, so that's the as-is value, or as-is appraisal of the
It
building?
was an appraisal done of what the fair market value is of the property, and that's the value that we assign for purposes of sale.
Okay.
We would not take less.
Okay. As I've mentioned, there are 3 ways of doing an appraisal, and one is looking at the future use of the building. And I don't think that we're going to go that far, but just knowing that helps. Thank you very much, Mr. Weiss.
Just on Morningside, and this is a comment that Mr. Brentley has made before. This is for me, and I was there in executive session, this is an example of a larger, more powerful entity being able to do something that an individual can't. That I think the offer by the individual was made a month or 2 before the URA came to the table, and they came in low. And so they were able to manipulate the system, in my mind, to be able to be the purchaser of this building. I completely respect the fact that the people of Morningside worked with the URA to come up with this plan, just as I respect the fact that the people of the North Side worked with Propel to come up with their plan. I just have a different point of view and am not favorable towards what the URA has done in this situation. Call the vote. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
I got a couple items. Yes on the report. I'll be voting no on number 7. I'll be voting no on number 15. I will abstain on number 19 and number 20, and I believe that that is it for now. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item 15.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item number 15 and number 16.
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item 15.
No on item number 16, yes on all other items. We will now move on to the report on personnel. Are there any questions that were not addressed in other means? Personnel? Seeing none? Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call? I'm sorry, Mr. Weiss. May I retract my roll call, ask, and turn it over to Mr. McCray?
Thank you. I'd like to recognize our staff members that are in the military and thank them for a job well done.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Now may we have a roll call?
Mr. Bentley?
There is an item here, and I don't see it, but I need to abstain from it. I don't see it, so what I'm going to do is, I'm not voting no, but I will abstain on the report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on page 21A.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Okay, the report's approved.
Mr. Weiss, just give me a moment here.
Just add it.
What's his change?
I need to abstain on page 23, section number, letter F, number 2. Pardon me? F 2. Oh, okay. But I need to abstain.
You're welcome. Please go to the financial report of the controller that is in front of you. Are there any questions, comments? Mr. Eisler.
Thanks, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Joseph, the indicators are not very good for the month of October. And 2 months to close the fiscal year, what's your expectation? Or expectations?
Our revenues are still down and our expenditures are slightly up due largely to retirement costs. I do expect us to close as projected.
So the retirement costs are up about 2.6%, and that's because of the increased mandate by the state?
That's correct.
So that's now starting to catch up with us?
Yes.
And supposed to go up significantly again next year, correct?
Yes.
So we can expect that to continue to go up?
Precisely.
Earned income was up and the real estate taxes were down?
Yes.
And the real estate taxes are down for what reason?
Because of the assessment appeals.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You are welcome. There are no new business items before us. Are there any new business items that need to be brought before this board? Mrs. Fink.
Okay, we have a new business item, which is the resolution on the evaluation of Superintendent Linda Lane for 2013. It's the Personnel Committee recommendation, and everyone has a copy. I would like to read the last two paragraphs. Now therefore, be it hereby resolved that after evaluating Superintendent Lane as provided in the contract, the board hereby confirms that Dr. Linda Lane, in the performance of her duties as superintendent pursuant to the contract, has met the performance priorities for 2013. Be it further resolved that having met the agreed-upon performance priorities for 2013, Superintendent Lane is entitled to the annual compensation set forth in the contract and already agreed upon by the board and superintendent of $230,000 effective January 1st, 2014.
Second.
We have a motion or any discussion? Mr. Brentley?
Just would like to add that presently her salary is $220, and according to the contract, she is due the, for lack of a better term, the cost of living or the increment of an additional $5,000 that she is due. The additional $5,000 is, can somebody explain for what purposes or what was improved that qualified us making that recommendation? Whoever.
If I may, Mr. Brantley, Dr. Lane's contract clearly states that she is to be evaluated. When she's evaluated, she receives a $5,000 raise regardless of the evaluation, and then depending on the goals, if they were met or not, the board then has the right to decide if she could receive up to $15,000. So 5 is automatic in the contract. The next 10 depends on what goals have been met and the board's discretion on that. Does that help?
Actually, it doesn't, but I appreciate it. I am willing, and I believe that I'm not suggesting that this superintendent did not work very, very hard, and I believe she worked hard. But the end result, we have to really be honest. And to suggest for an additional increase, to suggest that we are moving in the right direction and we're doing extremely well, is a little bit misleading. I am in support of the $5,000. I mean, that's a cost of living, that's for sticking it out, that's for working hard, that's for trying. But the end result tells a different story. And it's unfortunate that we have to do it in this kind of way because in executive session, difference of opinions rarely get aired. And so this is the only opportunity to share it. I think it should not, we should not send the message to the parents that we're doing well and the scores are great. We have witnessed some of the worst or expanded gaps in racial achievement in this district. We continue to close schools. We continue to disenfranchise parents and taxpayers. And we cannot give the impression that everything is A-OK and we're going to give raises accordingly. And so I would like to make the motion that we simply just change that last item to 5 instead of 10,000 to 5,000. I am in support of giving what is deserved, but anything that we do that suggests that everything is perfect and everything is fine, that's what an additional increment is supposed to mean. You know, job well done, you're doing great, we can see this, we can see that, and it simply has not been the case. And so that is a motion that I'm only asking that we allow her the 5,000, and that is well deserved. But anything else to suggest that things are okay, we should not be doing that. So that is the motion.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Seeing none, the motion dies. Mr. Brentley?
Thank you. I just want to remind their colleagues that very shortly, when we have to send the message out to the number of folks that we got to lay off, or the additional schools that we have to close, or the additional programs we have to pull back, that's when you want to keep in mind what you're doing here. And it's simply, it's not a fair thing. And I'm not angry, and it's not personal. But as a father of 5 and as one board member who still has a child in the district, you would not allow any of our other kids to do something like this, and you would reward them. And so we should be setting the example. That's the unfortunate part. Thank you very much. If you can't stand up and support me, do it for the kids or those folks we've already laid off, and do it for the ones we're getting ready to probably lay off, because things have not been the greatest. It's not to suggest that they weren't trying and people weren't trying, but it hasn't worked. It just simply hasn't worked. Thank you.
Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
On the new business item is read by Mrs. Fink. Mr. Brentley?
Abstain.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Motion is approved, 8 yes, 1 abstention.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there... Yes, I did call you Mr. Weiss. It's getting late. Are there any other items to be brought forward for new business that require a vote? Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have one item that I'd like to bring forward this evening. If I may, I'd like to read it for the record. This is a resolution of the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh authorizing the sale of the Bergwin School lot in Block 57C393. Whereas the school district has received an offer of $475,000 for the purchase of the Bergwin School through the Fourth River Development, LLC, and the district's consultant for the disposition of closed buildings in the district. And whereas the offer meets the minimum asking price for the property, and whereas the proposed purchaser is the Hazelwood Initiative Incorporated, 5344 2nd Avenue, Pittsburgh, PA 15207. And whereas proposed purchaser has the support of the community with regard to said purchase. Now therefore be it resolved, and it hereby resolved as follows. 1. The Board of Public Education hereby approves the sale of the Bergwin Building to the Hazelwood Initiative Incorporation for the sale price of $475,000 pursuant to 24 PS 7-707 at SEC. Did I say that right? Okay, thank you. 2, the proper officers are authorized, empowered, and directed to execute the agreement of sale and all other documents necessary for the transfer of said property upon approval of the solicitor. Resolved this 26th day of November 2013. It is still the 26th, yes. I need a second. Second. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor and a second. Is there any discussion? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I want to pull the public's attention again. If you notice, Propel again. Well, it is selling to the Hazelwood Initiative, who then will lease it to Propel. Mr. Joseph, can you tell me what is the asking price, or what have they offered?
The asking price is $475,000, and they are offering $475,000.
Okay, and what is the debt against it, if any?
As of September 30th, 2012, the debt was $244,599.
And I'm terrible in math, Mr. Joseph. So the balance is what? What will we actually walk away with as a district?
Around $225,000.
Once again, to the public, you can see the pattern. From Schenley to Reisenstein to the attempted stealing of Columbus, and it seemed like a big corporate takeover. This is not how you handle a public asset. You don't do that. It is a great building, and actually, this is a mistake that this board made when the previous administration here was told not to close the school, and they closed it, and now those kids are up there in Mifflin, and they're catching hell. They're catching hell because, unfortunately, the race issue continues to matter. And so now that community needs a school. To not even allow us to be able to talk about that and to have it introduced by an outgoing board member, and to not allow us to talk about it with the incoming board members and see what other options, they will put this on the table to continue to dwindle at this public school system. You don't allow it. Once again, we have to raise the question that why Propel? Now, Mr. Weiss, you know of these members of Propel. Do you know the applicant of Propel?
I'm familiar with Propel, so that's as much as I can tell you.
Okay. Mr. Resnick is still the applicant or the contact person, correct?
I would say that's correct. Yes.
Okay. You do know him, correct?
Well, I've dealt with him. He's not a friend of mine. I've dealt with him professionally. I don't know him in the sense that I am friends with him.
Okay. My questioning, Mr. Weiss, is that there is a relationship. I mean, you know him. You're friends, neighbors, or you live in the same community.
Mr. Brentley, let's not... We're on television here, so I'm going to be very clear about this, because the insinuation here is totally incorrect. I have no relationship with Mr. Resnick. I do not represent Mr. Resnick. He is not a social acquaintance of mine. I know him like I know a lot of other people that I come in contact with professionally. I have nothing to do with this sale. This was brought forward as new business. So to suggest or insinuate that I have some relationship with Jeremy Resnick is simply incorrect. And I want that very clear, because unfortunately you're doing this in a tape broadcast, so I want everybody to understand that. The suggestion that I have a relationship with Jeremy Resnick is something of your manufacture. It is not true.
And Mr. Weiss, the questions were raised because of how this applicant can have you and your firm to prepare a lease that was a great lease for them. No other agency was allowed to lease. They managed to get access and move their items so quickly before us. I still think, Mr. Weiss, and you and I will agree to disagree, that the way things are going here, I think it would have been helpful for you to give us full disclosure of any relationships so that we can move forward and we understand as things move
Mr.
forward.
Bradley, I want to make this very, very clear. I've spent 40 years practicing law and have a good reputation in this community and before the bar. I'm not going to let you, for your own political reasons, destroy that. I have no relationship with Propel. I oppose them in every case they bring. I have no relationship with Jeremy Resnick. That is simply false. And that's the most polite word I can use for it. So let's put it away. It's not true, and you know it.
Mr. Weiss, and I'm so sorry you're getting upset over it, but one of the things that we have to really look at is the fact that when we had all of these other applications that we denied, we challenged them. Mr. Weiss, somebody dropped the ball to allow this company to not challenge their petition in Harrisburg. They end up getting a charter school for Hazelwood because somebody didn't appeal it. That's not my job, Mr. Weiss. It is the job of the city.
Mr. Brentley, this board took no action. There was no appeal to be taken. Okay, so let's not pass the buck. The board took no action. The board was told, but the way it voted, there was no action taken, and it's a deemed denial. And under the charter school law, a deemed denial is a direct appeal to the Charter Appeals Board. And if the Charter Appeals Board grants the appeal, and basically they're the granting agency then, the charter is issued. So you are misleading the public. You are issuing falsehoods here. And since you're reflecting on me directly, I'm not going to put up with that.
Okay. All right, well, let me also begin to get a little offended as well. I don't appreciate you suggesting that I have a political agenda or a different motive. Mr. Weiss, it is clear, you did not appeal. When they appealed, we were supposed to register an appeal and to appeal when they appealed their decision. We did not do anything.
That is simply incorrect. The charter school law does not permit a district to appeal when it takes no action on an application. You are misinformed, Mr. Brentley.
Okay. Well, please explain to me when the environmental or the applicant that was submitted by the previous company, Mr. Taylor's and Mr. Howard's application, we challenged that when they filed their appeal. And we also challenged their signatures.
They appealed from a denial. We didn't deny this.
Well, a 4-1 vote is not an affirmative vote, am I correct?
It's no action. You didn't take any action on the application.
Okay, but a no action doesn't mean it's an affirmative.
No action is a deemed denial, and they have a right to a direct appeal under the charter school law.
Okay, and we did not get involved with that appeal, Mr.
We cannot get involved.
We cannot register.
The Charter Appeals Board will not entertain any pleading from a district that takes no action.
Well,
that's the law. If you don't like it, take it up with the legislature.
I would never do that, Mr. Weiss. I can tell you, we were misled. And I think what should have happened, if we did not make it, if a 4-1 vote means that there was no decision, well then between our president and our superintendent in your office, someone should have said, you guys have to come back to have another vote.
There is no other vote. That was, you were up against the deadline, Mr. We've been through this several times, and I know what you're doing here. I know what you're doing.
I'm trying to clarify.
You're grandstanding so this gets broadcast on television. This is history. The board was told they have to vote within so many days to take action on an application. A 4-4-1 vote is a non-action. That is the way it is. And every case that the board votes on that is denied, the district defends that action. The board has approved some, and those are approved. But anyone that knows my practice and knows our approach knows I am no friend of charter schools.
Well, I will say this, Mr. Weiss, and let me also clarify you as well. I don't appreciate you suggesting a political motive or an agenda. It is my right as an elected official, and you should not be one to get upset when we ask for clarification. Mr. Weiss, it is your job. We're not attorneys, and so the only way to find out is to get clarification. I do have my opinion as to what I think happened. I will look further for clarification, but I want to make sure, while the cameras are rolling, that you not characterize me that way. You can agree to disagree, but there's nothing else going on here other than understanding and getting to the bottom of that, and you should be willing to share if it takes all night, because that one mistake is going to cost this board $2.456 million. It will.
Go ahead.
Right? No,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you finish. I'm sorry. Go
My
ahead.
reaction to you was based upon your false insinuation that I have a relationship with Propel and Mr. Resnick. That is not correct. There was no mistake made here. The board took no action, and the law followed its course. Now, if you want to characterize it as a mistake, that's your right as a public official. I'm not going to take issue with that. I will take issue with the suggestion you make publicly that somehow I have a relationship with Mr. Resnick or I treat Propel differently. That is absolutely incorrect.
Okay, and I'm going to take issue with you characterizing me, getting clarification from you. It is your job, Mr. Weiss. It is your job. You don't get upset
And I've given you the clarification.
Fine.
You may not like it, but that's the
I understand.
clarification.
It's okay. It's okay. We'll move on and go
Please,
from there.
can we move on?
Can we move on?
Mr. Brentley, can you turn your mic off? Anyone else?
Yes, I
No, Mr. Brentley, we're still on this one. We have to vote.
Oh,
Everybody else can have a turn?
come on.
Well, look, I gave you a chance. You didn't want to begin. Look at this, 10 o'clock. I told you. You didn't listen.
Okay, I'm sorry. Please, 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 can we just move on? Mrs. Khaleesi, Mrs. Fink, Dr. Hawley?
Thank you. Mrs. Khaleesi, I understand your need to bring this forward. I too sympathize with the Hazelwood community in terms of not having a school. This district should never have closed Bergwin. As a principal, I made it very clear to the powers that be at the time that that school should have never been closed, and fought very vigorously at my own peril while working in the outrage of closing that school in that neighborhood. So, however, I am not willing to give that school over to a charter school. I am hoping that we will be able to move and reopen Bergwin at some time. And I'm hoping that, no offense to you whatsoever, but I'm hoping that with the new board coming on and the new board member, I will work very diligently with them to see that that happens for that community. Because let's be very clear that being a charter school, it is open to everyone throughout the city of Pittsburgh and beyond. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the children who live in Hazelwood will be going to that particular charter school. So since there is no guarantee that those children will have that opportunity, I will not cast my vote for that particular building to be sold to someone that I know is going to allow them to be a school, have a school in that building.
Ms. Arthur?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. You know, the Hazelwood Initiative went out to raise the money, the $475,000 a community group. It was loud and clear last night from the residents of Hazelwood and the representatives from the Hazelwood Initiative that this building is going to be used to serve the community long term. And there are a lot of community organizations in Hazelwood that need a building. And I think that to deny, in my opinion, the Hazelwood Initiative the opportunity to purchase this building and turn it over to the community is a mistake. So I am all in favor of this sale.
Mr. Sumter?
It's interesting what time does to folk, because there was a time when there was an unwritten policy by this board, no matter what the composition was to not sell a building to a charter school. There's also been a time when board members complain vociferously about walking items on at agenda review, much less a legislative meeting. An item of this magnitude hopefully will keep us here on the same day and not move into tomorrow. So the flip-flop in terms of positioning of thought to be unwritten policies or practices is surprising how they've come full circle tonight. Hazelwood Initiative did say they were going to lease the building to Propel. I would be in favor of more buildings being used as community resources in areas where there are closed buildings. There's nothing against that. But we are in a lease agreement with Propel at Columbus, and that's nothing to say that we couldn't be in a lease agreement with Propel in Hazelwood. It's funny when you inflict damage on a community and then come back to try to rectify it later. Again, it points to the impacts of the decisions we make in terms of school closings, the ramifications over time, and what happens in that case. So, from my point of view, I'm not in favor of selling the building, and I have mentioned at this table numerous times about reopening that building and using it as a school in that community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. This is a hard issue, and that testimony last night, I think that was the most, for me personally, the most compelling issue of the many we heard about last night. The people of Hazelwood came out, the Hazelwood Initiative came out and spoke in a really heartfelt manner about their desire to purchase this building. So this is, for some of the reasons you described, Mr. Sumter and Dr. Hawley, this is a tough decision. Seeing no one else? Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
This is on the new business item. Mr. Brentley?
No.
Mrs. Scalise?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
No.
Mrs. Azuda?
No.
Dr. Hawley?
No.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
No.
Mr. Sumter?
No.
Ms. Shealy?
No.
Okay, the new business item is defeated 2-7.
Since I'll start the announcements tonight. I just want to say to the people of Hazelwood that that was a very sad vote for me. And I hope that you can find a way to get the community center that you described, and possibly, maybe it is Bergwin, but just not, this is not the time for it. Does anyone else have anything that come before us that needs a vote? Does anyone have anything that does not require a vote? And can I say, okay. There's no second. Yeah, we gotta adjourn this one to even start that one. There's a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. That sounded like 3-3, Mr. Weiss. Would you please take a roll call?
It's the first time I've ever had to do this. This is on the motion to adjourn. Mr. Brentley?
No.
Mrs. Scalise?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Mrs. Azuda? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Okay. Dr. Hawley?
No.
Mr. Eisler? Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
No.
Ms. Shealy?
I'll say no.
The meeting is not adjourned.
Mr. Brentley, I will say that we are going to be the first meeting that will not have the full thing televised if we do not make this short and sweet. And I'm not intending to cut anyone else.
She needs to go home.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. Brentley, may Mrs. Fink
Yes,
go first? May Mrs. Fink go first, please?
Okay, consider it. You said
Mr.
you wanted to
Brentley.
go through regular business, we're doing it. You know, you could have avoided it, but you
Mrs. Fink. Teresa.
That's right.
Mrs. Scalise, please.
Yes?
Mrs. Fink.
Okay. There's really not a lot to say. I mean, I've been here a lot of years and seen a lot of issues, and I made some good decisions. I probably made some bad decisions, but I always did it because I love the kids. I love the school system. I'm a product of it. My children are. And I just hope that in the future, decisions need to be made with care and kindness.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Mr. Brentley.
Just want to ask Dr. Lane, the notice of your December 4th State of the District meeting that's going to be held at Kappa, you will brief the board prior to this meeting as to your presentation?
Yes.
Okay. You will not be announcing any school closings or layoffs at that meeting, correct?
Mr. Brentley, what we plan to do is give more higher level information. We will not be naming any specific schools or anything like that, but we will be talking about the way we think we need to go forward on that.
Okay. Doctor, I just want to stress at the highest level, it must come before us first, and we have to be careful what you say, because depending on what you say, people will begin to plan next school year. And if we begin to scare folks that we're going to be laying off and closing schools, then folks will begin to pack up already. So I'm asking that two things. The presentation is made before us first, and number two, that when you are talking, I believe, I have hope. I know we can turn this thing around, and I would hope that, your administration would have the same attitude. But definitely in that kind of forum there, we don't need folks to continue to panic. So as long as we can get that presentation, it would be very, very helpful. And then finally, my complaint about this is, as you know, you're having it early in the morning, and some of us have to do silly things like work. And it's, I would hope that when you do these kinds of things, that they would be mindful of board members. I mean, I'd like to be there. I was there, I think, when you had it before, but they have to be mindful of those of us who work. We are volunteers, and when scheduling anything, I think it should be checked with us, or at least consider us, so that we can, but it's important that we all be there. And so that's my complaint about it, my disappointment. And most parents will not be able to make that. So that's a disappointing thing again. At this point, we need parents' support, and we don't want to run them away from us. So in the very near future, keep in mind that we do work, some of us work, and checking with us or having it a little later in the evening, it would be helpful for us to be there in support of this event as well. Thank you.
Ms. Scalise?
I am going to leave. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I'm so tired at this point. I don't even know what to say. I guess that what I really wanted to just say was, well, I wanted to thank her for her time, but she's gone. I would like to thank everybody for their time and their work. Dr. Lane, it was great working with you. All of you, everybody knows I get emotional. When I came on this board, I came on with hopes of doing great things. And you know what? I didn't get disappointed. We have done great things. The Pittsburgh Promise is a great thing. Excellence for All. Yes, we have had to close schools and do so many things, but at the same time, I've only one time had to raise taxes, and it is more because of, thank you, it is more because of property assessments than it was because of any other thing. In the 12 years I've been here, I've done quite a bit of work with everybody around this table. We've done a lot of things together. And at the end of the day, if we're not concerned about the children in our schools and the communities around us, then we have no right to be here. This should not be a place of selfishness. Never. So as you move forward and your new colleagues come along, open the door, explain to them how things were done in the past, what was done, don't criticize what somebody did in the past, because you really don't know the shoes they were in. So, look forward. Try to see things forward. And if you ever need me, I'm not that far away. This is still my city. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scalise. Mrs. Azuda.
I, too, want to thank our outgoing board members very much. You will be missed. Jean, for her instant history on whatever issue. She always knew why it happened and when. Teresa, your insight on so many issues. Skip, for your keeping environmental issues in front of us. I don't know who's going to do that now. And Shireen for being my friend while I was president and supporting me and mentoring me. So thank you all very much.
You are quite welcome, Mrs. Azuda. Mr. McCray.
Well, I'm going to have fun with this one. I had the pleasure this morning of being at the CAS Expo, and it is one of the most rewarding parts about being a board member. I got to watch some presentations of long-term projects from the kids. There was a guy Josh from Brashear. He spent about 2 months in Peru. He brought his slides back and he shared them with everybody, and he shared his experience. He went to Machu Picchu, which is really cool. So, and the fact, what he brought back was, he was amazed when he came back because he was surrounded by English instead of Spanish. So he was totally immersed in the culture, and that's just a tremendous learning experience. And then, and you guys are going to have to suffer through this, I'm sorry, but there's only 4. Harrison Smith from Allderdice. He did one of the most fantastic presentations on Darwin's reason for writing his theory of evolution. He followed the voyage of the Beagle through various different stops and explained what Darwin did at each stop and how it impressed Darwin to begin his theory on evolution. This is what our children are learning in the schools. This is so great. Erin Denick from Carrick, she did a presentation on concussions and how important it is that the young people understand what a concussion is, what it can do to you, and how the long-term effects that it could be. Finally, and last but not least, this was my favorite because I am a Whovian. And Rachel Woodall from Bashir, she did a presentation on the science of Doctor Who. This is a sonic screwdriver. It makes funny noises, see? And if you look, yeah, it's setting 782, by the way. But the science behind Doctor Who, which is science fiction, it's a British science fiction program, for those of you who don't know about it, but I find it kind of humorous, but it has some very deep scientific background. They talk about cloning, they talk about robotics, they talk about all sorts of things in this program. And again, this is what our children are presenting in their long-term projects. This is what being a board member is all about. This is where we should be. We should be helping the children and understanding, that's the best part of my experience. I've had some horrible times at this table. And I have been, if nothing else, I pride myself in my honesty. Because I have had some horrible, tonight it's almost, what, 23:30? So it's like almost tomorrow. But the point is, keep an open mind. Ladies, keep an open mind. Go forward. Always think forward. And always put the kids first. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. McCray. Dr. Holly?
Thank you, Mr. McCray. I met Mr. McCray for the first time when he came to our school as the fireman, teaching our children how to get out of the house when their house is on fire. And I just want to thank you for that. I never will forget it, because at that time we had a devastating fire that killed several children. And I want to thank you for that work. And thank all the board members that are leaving us, and I wish you well. But I also would like to say, give a shout out to Dr. Wayne Walters. On Saturday evening, he was honored by Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated as the Distinguished Educator of the Year. That is a great honor among men in this city that believe in service to children and to families. And they really do a lot in the community. And to have that honor given to one of our principals in the school district, I was so proud of him and his school for the Saturday evening. So I just want to give a shout out to him for that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Holly. Mr. McCray?
I forgot one thing. I'm sort of the jokester on the board, but Mr. Eisler's the prankster. Watch yourself.
Mr. Eisler?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Thank you, Mr. McCray. Before I begin on the board members, I want to say that 2 weeks ago, Taylor Alderdice alum did their introduction of 5 individuals into the Hall of Fame. And I don't know what impressed people more. The 5 individuals, Lenore Mussoff, who was an English teacher who taught the 2 Howies, Howard Feynman, who is a nationally syndicated and writer and also on television as a commentator. Another Howie who had just written a book that Mackenzie Carpenter did a great story on a couple days later in the Post-Gazette. Farrell Rubenstein, who is unparalleled in terms of his commitment to this city. Larry Lucchino, who put together the Boston Red Sox. Every time I see somebody from Boston, I remind them that it took a Pittsburgher to put that team together that has won 3 World Series in the last 10 years. Debbie Norell, who was unbelievable, an inspirational speaker who just really hit a lot of very important points about public education, and my good friend Cy Holzer, who's at PNC. But the students who introduced them and the students who really ran the program were outstanding. They really told a message that closed the loop about public education when these 5 individuals went there and public education today. And it was really, really a very, very moving event. My hat's off to that total volunteer organization that does this every year. And to the board members, you know, it's very interesting. It's a shame Mrs. Fink left because I still have a fax that she sent me a couple months after she got on the board, which I cannot repeat here tonight. Mrs. Khaleesi, who attacked me many times prior to coming on the board, used to throw things at the board and the board table when she would come and advocate for her schools, her children, and her community. Mr. McCray, you made everything green. I have to say that I don't think anybody has been as passionate about green, and this district has been a leader in the Commonwealth for what it's doing for green schools. You are all going to be missed. And Ms. Shealy, you're extraordinary, both as a parent and as a professional. You're going to be missed, all of you. And I have total faith in the people coming on this board. I mean, I think that, you know, it's referred to as a new board. It's a continuing board. Like any other legislative body, it's not new. We're just continuing. And I do think, and Mr. Brentley said many times tonight about agreeing to disagree. I think you have to be able to agree to disagree on this board. It is not easy being on the board. I do not like to take part in personal attacks or personal affronts. Try desperately not to. But I do think that we have to deliberate for what is most important to us, and that's our children. You know, we always talk about children being the future of this city and or this state and or this country. If that's the case, then we're the future of the children, and I think that that is the role model attitude we have to take every time we sit at this table. So you will all be missed, but I know you're not going far. Just, Mrs. Khaleesi, if you come to public hearings, just come without anything in your hands, please. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
You're welcome, Mr. Sumter. Thank you, Ms. Shealy. It's somewhat interesting to me that, this is the nice part of the meeting. When we do make announcements, we share information, and we inform the public of things they may or may not know. And the fact that some board members wanted to truncate that was probably the reason why, as being a board member, we wanted to continue the conversation. In my opinion, being a board member is probably the most important job there is. It's a thankless job, and in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it's a volunteer position. So I'd just like to thank the outgoing board members for your commitment, for your service. I wish you all well, and I encourage you to please stay engaged in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. As always, I ask that folks invest in the future of our children. Please give to NEED, Negro Education Emergency Drive, and please give to the Pittsburgh Promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. I would just like to thank you all for the things that you've taught me and shown me and shared with me over the past 4 years. and I'll agree to disagree with you, Mr. Sumter. The most important job is being a parent. And so I'm going to leave really soon so I can go home and see my kids. But I truly appreciate all of you, and we don't all see things the same way, but that's what makes us each unique, and I appreciate being able to learn with you. May I have a motion, please? All in favor of adjourning this meeting, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. This meeting is adjourned.
Can't let our board members leave without getting a chance. I waved it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I just want to thank you all so much. And I know that we've had tough discussions and many things that we didn't always agree on, but to the departing board members, I have to thank you so much for all the time, the effort. I think unless you're on a board like you all have been, you don't realize the amount of time it really takes, the amount of effort you, and you're basically on duty all the time. I don't care if you're at the grocery store or wherever, because people are coming up and talking to you about things like that. So I can't thank you enough for that. And I think about, I talked to Franco when I called Mrs. Scalese, and Franco was the first person in Pittsburgh that I talked to when I first got the job as deputy. I called her house, Franco answered, he and I talked, and I thought it was interesting that he and I would talk again this afternoon. So I thought about that. And of course, we've done some work on fire safety together, Mr. McCrae, because we lost a child to a fire, and we talked about that and how we could embed fire safety into our work. So anyway, and I wish Mrs. Fink was still here because she is the historian. I just don't know how we're going to do it without, well, back in so-and-so, this is how that happened. We're going to have to call her on the phone, I guess. And Mr. Sumter, we're of course glad that you're re-elected but staying. So, but anyway, and I also thank our continuing members as well, because whether we agree or disagree, I appreciate how tough the job is, and thank you for doing it.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. I think I already adjourned the meeting. Okay. Yes.
Oh, no, Mac. Yeah, I wanted to thank you for taking on job of president, because that's a tough job. That is a tough job. And you've done it with grace, and I appreciate that. And I also have appreciated being able to reach out to your kids at school occasionally, seeing them, and they report when I show up at the school. So, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Lane does make her rounds. So we will now call to order the meeting of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Scalese? I'm here. Mrs. Fink is left. Mrs. Zuda? Dr. Hawley? Here. Mr. Eisler? Here. Mr. McCrae?
Here.
Mr. Sumter?
Here.
Ms. Shealy?
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. If no one objects, we would like to take a slightly different tack tonight and approve the entire or deny the entire report as a whole. That would be the minutes, the committee report on education, the committee report on business, committee report on personnel, and the financial statements and travel expense reports that are before you. Does anyone have any objections to that? Mr. McCrae.
I have to abstain on the minutes, that's all, because I wasn't here.
Okay. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call on the entire intermediate unit packet?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Scalese?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCrae?
As I said, yes on the packet, but I'll abstain on the minutes.
Okay. Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Report's approved.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. This meeting is adjourned.